Chapter 157. This time, Qin Wushuang had spent more than a month in solitary training. During this time, besides going out to find food, Qin Wushuang had spent almost all of his time on transforming the Ling Qi. Qin Wushuang was very careful. In the end, he realized that he had indeed overcorrected. He had already completely merged the Ling Qi that he had absorbed. There was not a bit left. The absorption of the Ling Qi was different from the absorption of the inner strength of the pre-sky realm warriors. The absorption of the inner strength could be said to be 100% seamless, and there would not be any loss. However, the Ling Qi was different. During the process of absorbing the Ling Qi, there would be a large loss. During the transformation, it would automatically remove the Ling Qi that could not be merged and excrete it through the pores. In the end, only about 20 to 30% of the Ling Qi could be used. Especially the inner pellet of the spiritual beasts, it was not compatible with the dantian of the human. If the Ling Qi was repelled, it would be more difficult to absorb. It was already a success to merge 20% of the Ling Qi. After more than a month of solitary training, Qin Wushuang felt that he had taken another step forward on the path of the initial stage of the spiritual martial force. He knew that it was related to the Ling Qi he had absorbed twice. However, more importantly, he had become more proficient in the combination of the few techniques. After walking out of the cave, Qin Wushuang felt that his footsteps were much lighter. When he breathed, he also felt much more comfortable. He could almost feel the pulse of the spiritual qi of the virtuous heaven main channel. He knew that this was an increase in the stage. If it were not for the continuous increase in the stage, he would not be able to feel the Ling Qi so clearly and meticulously. It seems that the teacher is right, although there are only 4 stages in the spiritual martial force. However, within each stage, there are many small stages. Almost every step is a hurdle. After crossing a hurdle, I can clearly feel my improvement. I don't even need the enemy to check. Through my own understanding of nature, I can know a thing or two. Upper sky is upper sky. To a pre-sky realm warrior, this is unimaginable. Qin Wushuang recalled that ever since he had entered the upper sky realm, everything was like a dream. The colors of the entire world seemed to have become more colorful. Every day, he greedily grasped, learned, and absorbed. He didn't even have the time to reflect on his journey. I wonder, how has my family been doing in these 2 months? When Qin Wushuang thought about his family in the Bayou country, a wave of warmth emerged from his heart. It was surging in his heart. And for the second round of the martial arts student exam, I wonder how those martial arts students from the Bayou performed. Don't disappoint me too much. Otherwise, the position of a high-rank subordinate country would not be stable even if it was given. Qin Wushuang couldn't help but feel concerned. Since he came from the Bayou country, he was one of them. The Bayou country was his hometown. It was normal for a person to hope that everything would go well in his hometown. The Laba Festival is only a little more than a month away. I've stayed in the numinous sky mountain range for nearly 2 months, so there's no harm in going to a strange place to broaden my horizons. With this in mind, Qin Wushuang decided to walk around and familiarize himself with the terrain. Along the way to the north, Qin Wushuang had unknowingly walked towards the direction of the virtuous cloud main peak. After walking for a while, he seemed to realize that subconsciously he still felt somewhat indignant about not becoming a core disciple. Deep inside his heart, he still yearned for the virtuous cloud main peak. After walking for 2 days, Qin Wushuang realized that the number of Stargaze Palace disciples he met along the way had gradually increased. Initially, Qin Wushuang had suppressed his upper sky presence. He didn't want to appear too different. After all, there were not many upper sky realm disciples among the advanced disciples. Only the core disciples who trained at the virtuous cloud main peak had accumulated upper sky realm. Only, after walking for 2 days, he realized that keeping a low profile also had its disadvantages. Some advanced disciples kept coming up to talk to him, and it was obvious that many of them did not have good intentions. To such people, naturally, Qin Wushuang did not mind teaching them a lesson and telling them to get lost. He turned around a mountain pass and looked to the north. That towering mountain peak that pierced through the clouds was the core of the entire Virtuous Cloud mountain range. The Virtuous Cloud main peak. As the name suggested, the Virtuous Cloud main peak had an imposing manner that pierced through the clouds and reached the sky. Just by looking at this imposing manner, one would feel as if they were looking up to a high mountain. Indeed, it had an imposing manner that made one feel as if they were looking up to it. Qin Wushuang smiled lightly and thought inwardly. It seems that the world inside the Virtuous Cloud main peak is the most exciting place for the younger generation of the Stargaze Palace. After the year-end exam, I will enter this Virtuous Cloud main peak. In 10 years, I will become the most outstanding person among the younger generation of the Stargaze Palace. After 10 years, Qin Wushuang would only be 27 years old. That would be the golden age. Just as he was lost in his thoughts, suddenly, he felt a wave of qi movement from the forest next to him. Clearly, this qi was not from the upper sky realm. However, it was from a top pre-sky realm warrior. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang sensed that there were 3 people. Each of them was at the peak of the pre-sky realm, and none of them were at the upper sky realm. Apparently, these 3 people had deliberately concealed their bodies and suppressed their breathing. However, to upper sky realm warriors, even if they had concealed themselves 10 times more, at most, they could only hide visually. There were too many ways for an upper sky realm warrior to find them. Regardless of hearing, the touch of the upper sky, spiritual qi, or the sense of smell, they could easily find out where they were hiding without the slightest error. Qin Wushuang knew that most likely, these were those advanced disciples of the Stargaze Palace that harbored evil intentions. He could not help but remember his teacher's warning. Competition existed between all the disciples in the Stargaze Palace, including the disciples from the same faction. Due to the rarity of the resources, once some natural treasures appeared, most likely, there would be a situation of competition among the disciples. At that time, you must use all your power to seize it. You must not be modest. The Stargaze Palace did not advocate killing disciples. However, they emphasized that the strong would be respected. If you have the strength, go ahead and seize it. As long as you do not kill your fellow disciples, you are allowed to use any methods. Remember, 4 words, do not pass on your responsibility. This warning was already straightforward enough. Only, after thinking about it carefully, apparently, there were even more obscure things that could be read. That was, even if you were hiding something on your body, if your fellow disciples coveted it, they could still rob you. As long as they did not kill you, they would be allowed to rob you. The strong would be respected. This was the survival rule of the Stargaze Palace. To put it precisely, this was the universal rule in the Tianxian land. Regardless of Qin Wushuang's time at Eastwood Town, or when he had ascended to the royal family of the Bayou, or now when he had entered the Stargaze Palace, he had experienced this point clearly. Last time, his teacher Tan Zhongqi had taken him to the Jian Mountain. That experience had left a deep impression on him. The insufferably arrogant old monster extreme didn't even dare to let out a fart in front of Master. He was as obedient as a sheep, completely lacking the ferocious and overbearing aura he had when he was in Eastwood Town. At that moment, the principle of the strong being respected had been fully demonstrated. To be able to turn an insufferably arrogant bully into a docile little lamb, this was the law. Although Qin Wushuang had sensed that these 3 did not have good intentions, he did not expose them. Instead, he walked forward. Along the way, he had already met a few groups of people like this. Cough, cough. Junior brother in front. A greeting sounded from behind him. When those 3 saw Qin Wushuang leaving, they all rushed out and formed a triangular encirclement with Qin Wushuang in the middle. Calling me, Qin Wushuang turned around and asked with a smile, "Is there anyone else here?" One of the horse-faced guys had a trace of mockery on the corner of his mouth. He sized Qin Wushuang from head to toe. Inwardly, he looked down on him because of his young age. "This junior brother, you have just entered the sect, right?" "Yes, I don't know how to address you 3 senior brothers." "Which senior do you belong to?" According to Qin Wushuang's estimation, usually, these advanced disciples were at least at the level of an elder. For those at a lower level, such as the butlers, even if they were qualified to take in disciples, most of them would not be able to enter the ranks of the advanced disciples. After all, the hierarchy of the Stargaze Palace was too strict. Under the Palace Master, there were 8 Shakyamuni. Under the 8 Shakyamuni, there were the elders and the palace emissaries. After these people, it was the butlers. This kid, does he know the rules? Another chubby guy called out with a muffled voice. You're the last junior brother. Of course you should report your background first. Yeah, if I report my background and you guys don't, wouldn't I be at a disadvantage? Qin Wushuang shook his head. No. That horse-faced guy laughed eerily. It seems that you don't know the rules. Not being honest before the senior brothers is the biggest taboo in the Stargaze Palace. According to the rules, you must be taught a lesson. Since you are young, I will give you a chance to redeem yourself. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang found it funny. These 3 guys were truly despicable. The rules of the Stargaze Palace? When he had entered the sect, his teacher had vouched for him and the head palace master had agreed. As long as he did not violate the 3 principles mentioned by the head palace master, he did not need to care about all the rules. This was the treatment that his master, Tan Zhongqi, had fought so hard to obtain in order to take care of his cultivation. Now these 3 guys who had eyes but did not see were asking him to follow the rules. Naturally, Qin Wushuang did not know whether to laugh or cry. I just don't know. How do you want me to redeem myself? From Qin Wushuang's tone, there was a trace of imperceptible sneer and mockery. Along the way, he had been suppressing himself and ignoring those fellow disciples who had ulterior motives. However, with so many things happening one after another, he really couldn't stand it anymore. It's simple. First, report your teacher, and then hand over all the good things you have on you. Just treat it as the toll. As long as we're satisfied with the things you have, you can leave safely. Otherwise, you'll have to suffer a lot. Qin Wushuang nodded slowly. If that's the case, then I will confess. My teacher's surname is Tan, and his name is Zhongqi. Tan Zhongqi? To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 158. This name sounded a little unfamiliar. The fat man was first taken aback as he cried out, Tan Zhongqi? Who is that? Among the 16 elders of the Stargaze Palace, there is no such name. Could he be the disciple of the butler? That horse-faced guy also laughed dryly. It's strange that the disciple of the butler could enter the virtuous Cloud Mountain Range. However, this name is rather old-fashioned. Tan Zhongqi, haha. The remaining young man who had remained silent all this while frowned slightly, as if he was thinking about something. He moved his lips and wanted to speak. However, he did not speak after he glanced at Qin Wushuang. That horse-faced guy waved his hand. Kid, since your teacher is not an elder, then you should know your place. Even if we beat you up today, we will not be able to reason with you later. In that case, which elder do you 3 belong to? Qin Wushuang found it hard to believe that such a bastard disciple existed. He did not even know the name of the second palace master and dared to boast shamelessly about how old-fashioned the name Tan Zhongqi was. If Shizuan were to hear this, he would definitely slap them to who knows where. Qin Wushuang also noticed that that young man seemed to have understood something. However, from his expression, he did not seem to get along well with the other 2. Although they had come together, they were clearly at odds with those 2. That chubby guy patted his chest, and the fat on his entire body trembled as he cried out strangely, Kid, stop with the nonsense. Take out the things you have. If you can enter our eyes, we will let you suffer less today. Or else humph. Qin Wushuang smiled casually and nodded. Then he pulled out that upper sky blade and threw it to the ground casually. It went straight into the ground and into the hilt. That blade emitted a strong, buzzing sound as it was activated by Qin Wushuang's spiritual qi. After it had entered the ground, the body of the blade still trembled and emitted an ear-piercing sound. The only good thing I have is this blade. If the 3 of you think you have the ability to take it away, you can come and take it yourself. Qin Wushuang's tone was indifferent. A trace of surprise flashed across the eyes of that silent young man as he looked at Qin Wushuang with astonishment. Apparently, he saw that Qin Wushuang's move was profound. Vividly, there was a form of powerful presence that made him tremble inwardly. Although it was hidden when he made this move, there was a trace of irrepressible restlessness. Innate. When these two words suddenly popped out, the young man's eyes were filled with shock. The other two exchanged a look. Obviously, they had also vaguely felt a trace of a strange aura. However, they were too careless and did not react in time. That young man asked in a low voice, "May I ask, is the teacher you were talking about the second palace master of the Stargaze Palace?" Qin Wushuang could not help but laugh. Could it be that his teacher's name was such a secret in the Stargaze Palace? Out of the three of them, two of them were completely ignorant, and one of them was just guessing, but he still couldn't be sure. In the Stargaze Palace, the names of the 5 palace masters would almost never appear in anyone's mouth. Even the way Hall Master D addressed him previously would not mention his name. As for the disciples of the 5 great Hall Masters, they naturally knew the names of their respective masters. However, these people usually cultivated in the mountains, and it was basically impossible for them to meet each other. Thus, even if they had some small contact with each other, it was impossible for them to talk about each other's masters' names. And the disciples of those Shakyamuni and elders would at most know the surnames of the other elders and Shakyamuni. They would rarely mention their names. As for the palace masters, they usually only called them head palace master or second palace master. They did not even know their surnames. Hearing that young man's question, the expression of the horse-faced guy and that fat guy changed drastically. They looked at Qin Wushuang nervously and could not help but take 2 steps back. Qin Wushuang shook his head with a bitter smile. "I thought that my teacher's name was no longer useful. I didn't expect that someone would still know it." As soon as he said these words, that fat guy gave a miserable cry and fell backwards. His little heart could not accept this reality. Before Qin Wushuang could make a move, he fell backwards. That horse-faced guy's face turned ashen as he said stutteringly, Second palace master? Your teacher? You don't believe me?" Qin Wushuang said with a cold smile. "If you have the chance, you can go to the Green Cloud Palace and ask around." The horse-faced guy said incoherently, No need to ask around. His horse-faced face looked as if he had seen a ghost, as his expression was indescribably strange. He looked around and saw that the fat guy had already fallen down, and the other young man did not have the same intentions as him. Looking left and right, he couldn't find anyone to share this pressure with. Currently, Qin Wushuang kept urging his upper sky, qi, to gush over. It caused that horse-faced guy's teeth to tremble uncontrollably. His entire body trembled as if he was sifting through a sieve. "What's wrong? This saber is an upper sky offensive weapon." Qin Wushuang sneered. His pressure was very targeted. Just now, the young man did not act ruthlessly and did not make any threats. It seemed that he did not have the same intentions as these 2 people. Therefore, his pressure was not targeted at that young man. But Qin Wushuang did not show any mercy to that horse-faced guy. He did not intend to use force to hurt him, but this kind of psychological punishment by using upper sky qi was 100 times worse than physical punishment. It was a complete torture. In just a moment, that horse-faced guy was covered in sweat, as if he had just been fished out of the water. Qin Wushuang knew that it was about time for the punishment to end at this point. If he continued to pressure this guy, he would be too frightened and would not live long even if he did not kill him. Immediately, he withdrew his aura and pulled the Xiantian realm saber with his palm. Then he placed it back on his waist. "Be more observant in the future." Qin Wushuang left a warning and walked away. "Senior brother, please wait." This time, it was a young man who spoke. Qin Wushuang turned around and glanced at him. He did not have a bad impression of this young man. A moment ago, when the 3 of them had surrounded him, he had intentionally left some gaps in that corner. Those 2 did not see through it. Being an upper sky warrior, Qin Wushuang had seen through it easily. Apparently, this young man had intentionally left that gap. To put it bluntly, he was reminding him to break through from there. It seemed that this person did not intend to harm him. "Senior brother, can we talk in private?" that young man asked cautiously. However, there was a trace of expectation in his eyes. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang was moved. Although he had entered the sect for 2 months, he still did not know much about the Stargaze Palace. It would be a good choice if he could find an honest person to learn more about it. He nodded, "Follow me." Immediately, he walked forward. That young man glanced at those two on the ground. He also followed in large strides. After passing through this forest, they arrived at a high slope. Qin Wushuang slowed down his steps and waited for that young man to catch up. "If you have anything to say, say it here." That young man nodded and gathered his courage to ask, "Senior brother, are you in the upper sky realm?" Qin Wushuang did not expect that he would ask this question as soon as he opened his mouth. He nodded, "Yes, indeed." That young man gave a long sigh. "If you're not in the upper sky realm, how could you make them fall into such an embarrassing state without moving a finger? Indeed, the upper sky realm is powerful. Yes, you three have been acting as road robbers in this place. Don't you feel you are losing face for the Stargaze Palace?" That young man shook his head helplessly. "I do not come from the same sect as those two. Only, they use both hard and soft tactics to force me to join their side." "Haha, no need to explain to me. Anyways, in the Stargaze Palace, there is no rule against robbing. You want to talk in private? What else do you want to say?" That young man bit his lips lightly and suddenly said, "I have a presumptuous request. I wonder if you are interested in hearing it." Since it is a presumptuous request, then there is no need to ask. Qin Wushuang was rather straightforward. That young man was stunned and then said in a low voice, "In fact, it is not a completely presumptuous request. If you are willing to do me the honor, I am willing to pay." "Payment?" Qin Wushuang found it funny. "What payment do you have? Senior brother, do you agree?" That young man did not answer and asked, "Agree to what?" "In fact, it's simple. You don't need to do anything. As long as you let me follow you to that nature manifestation valley, I will pay you 2 spiritual grasses." Nature Manifestation Valley? Qin Wushuang was stunned. What kind of place was that? He had never planned to go to the Nature Manifestation Valley. How come this guy had suddenly mentioned it? That young man observed his expression and saw a trace of astonishment on Qin Wushuang's face. He asked with disbelief, "Senior brother, it is impossible that you are not going to that Nature Manifestation Valley. Why must I go to the Nature Manifestation Valley?" Qin Wushuang's face turned cold. That young man thought he had said something wrong. He stuck out his tongue and said apologetically, "I spoke too much. Since senior brother is not going to the Nature Manifestation Valley, then I will take my leave." He, in front of an innate expert, he was under a lot of pressure. On one hand, he was worried that this innate expert disciple would be rude and unreasonable and directly rob his things. On the other hand, he was looking forward to having an innate expert to protect him so that he could go to the Nature Manifestation Valley. "Wait," Qin Wushuang called out lightly. That young man stopped in his tracks. "Senior brother, do you have any other instructions? Then tell me, what is the Nature Manifestation Valley?" Qin Wushuang did not try to cover up his mistake. It was normal for a new disciple to not know. He was not afraid of not knowing. He was afraid of not knowing. To Qin Wushuang, everything was still in the learning stage. It was not a bad thing to ask more. However, that young man did not think so. He said in surprise, "Senior brother, you actually don't know what is the Nature Manifestation Valley." Qin Wushuang said impatiently, "I have only been in the sect for 2 months. Is it strange that I don't know?" That young man looked at Qin Wushuang in disbelief and said stutteringly, "Only been in the sect for 2 months? Directly becoming the second palace master's disciple? No wonder, no wonder." Then he realized that he had lost his composure and hurriedly said, "Then the Nature Manifestation Valley is like this, 5 chapters, 1 more to go. Could it be that everyone is waiting for the monthly votes to be announced at the end of the month? Ah, vote for them. They're chasing closely behind. Everyone is responsible for protecting their chrysanthemum. No one wants to see their first place, which has been maintained for half a month, suddenly be taken away by someone. The monthly votes list is very unpredictable and can change in an instant. We have to guard against some tricks. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 159. Get to the main points. Qin Wushuang did not have the patience to listen to that long speech. Okay. That young man was straightforward as he said, a month before the end of the year exam, the advanced disciples and even the core disciples of the Stargaze Palace would appear around the Nature Manifestation Valley. It was a gathering of people. As long as you were an advanced disciple of the Stargaze Palace, you would go and join the fun as long as you have the time. There, if everyone has good things, if they do not need it, they would take it out and exchange it. Everyone takes what they need. Thus, that gathering at the Nature Manifestation Valley could be said to be a trade fair. It's a trade fair that happens before the end of the year exam. It's also a summary of a year's training. Qin Wushuang nodded and finally understood. Suddenly, he asked, "This way, you also want to go to that Nature Manifestation Valley to make some trades?" That young man could not lie before an upper sky. He nodded. That's my intention. For us pre-sky realm disciples, we only think about how to enter the upper sky realm. We work hard to enter the upper sky realm. Perhaps, in the eyes of you upper sky disciples, we are only some lowly ants. Qin Wushuang smiled lightly. He knew that this person was pretending to be weak and walking the path of sadness. However, he did not expose him. To enter the upper sky realm, you need the assistance of the body sculpting pellet and the initial stage spiritual pellet. These two pellets help to shape the body and provide spiritual chi. They complement each other. With any one of them, you can increase the speed of entering the upper sky realm. However, it's extremely rare. It's extremely difficult to get these two things from there. Even upper sky disciples would not have such things. The young man was rather honest as he shook his head. I also know these things. This time, I only want to exchange a few medicinal materials. In total, I need 16 materials to make these two pellets. Each year, I collect some and exchange some. I hope to collect all these materials in 5 years. Then, I will pay a considerable amount of commission to ask the alchemist to help me make these two pellets. 5 years. To ordinary people, this was a long time. However, to martial artists, 5 years was a short period of time. It could even be said to be as insignificant as a grain of sand in the long river of time. If a Hotian warrior was able to collect all these materials within 5 years, then he could be considered as a successful person. Many people couldn't even gather a single pill formula in 10 or 20 years, let alone gather the ingredients. If he couldn't even collect the pill formulas, how would he know where to collect the medicinal ingredients? In the world of cultivation, everything was valuable and private. Even if it was a pill formula, which was obviously a common commodity, if you didn't have it, you would have to pay a high price to exchange for it from someone else. It was obviously trash, but in the hands of those who needed it, it was a top-notch resource. Alchemy was all about the success rate. Even if you handed in the materials, it wasn't guaranteed that you would be able to refine it out of pure gold. Regarding the golden body core and the initial stage spiritual core that would allow one to enter the upper sky realm from the pre-sky realm in the Stargaze Palace, the success rate would be between 60 to 80%. In other small sects, the success rate would not exceed 50%. If he failed, the commission would be wasted, and those materials would also be completely wasted. The alchemist would not be responsible for any of this. In the worst case, the alchemist would do you a favor the next time he made the pills. He would ask for less commission as compensation. This would also depend on the alchemist's good character. Or else, he would not be responsible. The commission for the next visit would still be the same as before. Thus, for ordinary people, as long as they had the conditions, they would collect at least 2 or 3 times the amount of materials. It was to prevent the failure of making the pills and wasting years of effort. It would not be easy to bear such a blow. By collecting more, even if he failed to make the pills, he could still try again. It would be easier to accept than having his hopes shattered. When that young man saw that Qin Wushuang was silent, he asked worriedly, "Senior brother, if you have never been to the Nature Manifestation Valley, you should go and join the fun. You would also need someone to lead the way for the first time. For this aspect, I would be the most suitable, and I would be happy to run errands for you. This is your reward? Qin Wushuang asked with a smile. That young man immediately said, Of course not. How could this be considered a reward? You're an upper sky disciple. Of course you would not be interested in ordinary rewards. I can't give you a higher reward. Thus, I would like to ask you to name a price. If I have the ability to bear it. Qin Wushuang waved his hand. Tell me, why do you have to follow me? That young man sighed. Senior brother, you have indeed just entered the sect. That Nature Manifestation Valley is a fair trade in name, but the so-called fairness is also relative. Many times, there are cases of cheating, seizing, or even openly possessing. Thus, for us weak post-liminary realm disciples, it is very important to strive for a fair trade basis. And if I follow you, senior brother, during the trade, post-liminary realm warriors would not dare to play tricks, but upper sky disciples would also have to think twice. This is a little bit of selfishness on my part. Qin Wushuang understood. To put it bluntly, this was borrowing his upper sky power to boost his confidence and strive for a fair trade, creating a better trade basis. To put it more generally, it was a bit like a fox exploiting the might of a tiger. Yes, you are honest. Then let's go take a look. Qin Wushuang was also curious. He himself did not have a great need for medicinal pills. At least for now, during his cultivation process, he did not have any physical discomfort or signs of needing to strengthen his physical body. In this way, medicinal pills, such as the dragon and tiger body sculpting pill, were also dispensable to him. Of course, he was still far from breaking through to the next realm. If he really reached that stage, perhaps his desire for medicinal pills would also arise. Thus, he decided to go take a look. Whether it was a trade or not, it was always good to see what was going on. Of course, he himself did not need medicinal pills, but it did not mean that he had no need for them at all. On the contrary, he had always had a great desire for medicinal pills that could allow him to enter the upper sky realm. His calculations were for the future of the Qin clan. What kind of reward does senior brother require? That young man asked. Qin Wushuang smiled. It's very simple. Since you have started to collect medicinal ingredients, you must know the pill formulas for the physical body pill and the upper sky initial stage pill. Make a copy for me. If you have extra ingredients on you, give me a copy as well. If you don't, it doesn't matter. The pill formulas will suffice. All right, these 2 types of medicinal pills each require 8 types of ingredients. Among them, the physical body pill requires 1 main ingredient and 7 supplementary ingredients. As for the upper sky initial stage pill, it is divided into 5 types, each requiring 1 to 5 main ingredients. I now have sufficient 7 supplementary ingredients for the physical body pill, and only 1 main ingredient is missing. As for the upper sky initial stage pill, I have only collected 3 supplementary ingredients, and currently have no main ingredient. Let me see the pill formulas. Qin Wushuang said. That young man did not dare to be negligent. He hurriedly took out the pill formulas and respectfully handed them over. Qin Wushuang glanced at them and memorized the medicinal ingredients required by the 2 pill formulas. The main ingredient required for the physical body pill was a type of spirit stone. The main ingredient required for the upper sky initial stage pill corresponded to the basic attributes of the 5 elements of heaven and earth. If there was only 1 main ingredient, then the upper sky initial stage pill would only contain 1 type of spiritual power attribute. Every time a main ingredient was added, corresponding to one of the 5 elements, the upper sky initial stage pill would have an additional spiritual power attribute. After collecting the 5 basic main ingredients, the upper sky initial stage pill that was refined would be the most perfect, luxurious, and ideal upper sky initial stage pill. It would definitely be a great supplement for the Haute Eon to enter the upper sky initial stage. The Haute Eon warrior who took this pill would also have unlimited potential. These 5 main ingredients did not have a fixed choice. As long as it was the inner core of a spirit beast or spirit bird that corresponded to the basic attributes of the 5 elements, it would suffice. The lowest requirement was a spirit beast of the lower sky initial stage, with no upper limit. Of course, it was only a lower sky initial stage pill. It was not worth it to use the inner core of a spirit beast of a higher level. It was equivalent to using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Therefore, in theory, the most perfect upper sky initial stage pill should be refined by collecting the inner cores of the 5 lower sky initial stage spiritual beasts. After Qin Wushuang memorized the pill formulas, he exerted force on his fingertips and threw the 2 pill formulas back to the young man. He nodded and said, "All right, lead the way." He had already begun to plan in his heart and started to have ideas about these 2 types of pills. For Hotian warriors, these ingredients were indeed very difficult to collect, especially for lower sky initial stage spiritual beasts. Collecting one was already very difficult, not to mention collecting 5 different types of spiritual beasts. It was basically a fool's dream. Their goal was basically to collect 1 lower sky initial stage spiritual beast. This was already very extravagant. With the strength of a Hotian warrior, if they wanted to deal with spiritual beasts, they would have no chance of winning unless they worked together. The Nature Manifestation Valley was located at the foot of the Lingyun main peak. It was a valley separated from the other main peaks. Because of the myriad of weather and scenery, it was called the Nature Manifestation Valley. The terrain of this area was very unique, and the scenery was also very beautiful. It was the dividing line between the Lingyun main peak and the other areas. Once they reached the Wanxiang Valley, it was the place where the other advanced disciples stopped. If they went any further, they would enter the forbidden area. According to the rules, advanced disciples were not allowed to take even half a step into the Lingyun main peak. It was because of this that the Nature Manifestation Valley became such a trading place. Both Upper Sky and Hotian warriors were willing to gather here. Hotian warriors came to get some of the spirit chi at the edge of the Lingyun main peak and see what kind of scenery the place where Upper Sky initial stage cultivators cultivated was like. Even if they just looked at it from afar, it was easy to get excited. As for the core disciples, they were not willing to leave the Lingyun main peak too far and go to other places to trade with the advanced disciples. That would be an insult to their stature. When Qin Wushuang and the young man arrived at the Nature Manifestation Valley, it was already very lively. Most of the advanced disciples had already started to seize the advantageous terrain and were preparing to set up their stalls and build their own trading platform. In this place, a powerful trading platform would be very valuable. As for the core disciples, there were only a few of them. Obviously, this kind of trading was usually started by the advanced disciples. The core disciples would only slowly join in later. Qin Wushuang was not in a hurry to reveal his upper sky initial stage strength, so as not to cause the other advanced disciples to be overly vigilant. He wanted to see what materials were used to refine the upper sky initial stage spiritual pill and the physical body golden elixir, and how popular they were. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 160. Through the young man's self-introduction, Qin Wushuang found out that his surname was Yin and his name was Yin Feng. This Yin Feng felt much more secure when he followed Qin Wushuang. He looked left and right. His goal was simple. He wouldn't pay attention to anything that wasn't required to refine the 2 Xiantian pellets. Qin Wushuang wasn't as picky as Yin Feng. He looked around everywhere. His main purpose was to familiarize himself with the trade fair in the Myriad Elephant Valley. He didn't need to trade anything. Yin Feng had already collected a lot of materials for refining the Golden Physique pellet and Xiantian initial stage pellet. They were enough to refine 4 to 5 times. What he lacked now was the main material for the Golden Physique pellet and Xiantian initial stage pellet. The main material for the Golden Physique pellet was a spiritual stone called Azure Frost Stone. There weren't many high-grade spiritual stones in the Xiantian realm, but it wasn't easy for postnatal warriors to obtain. After looking around, there were only a few people who had the Azure Frost Stone. However, No one was interested in it for the time being. Clearly, many of these people didn't even have the Sciention pellet recipe, so they naturally didn't know the use of the Azure Frost Stone. However, some of those who had the recipe didn't lack the Azure Frost Stone. Yinfeng looked at Qin Wushuang for help. Azure Frost Stone. If he could obtain one, he could refine it 5 times. The main material wasn't much. A finger-sized Azure Frost Stone was enough for 5 uses. Qin Wushuang walked towards a stall without batting an eyelid. There weren't many things in this stall. Apart from the Azure Frost Stone, there weren't many other things. Qin Wushuang expected that this person was lacking. He smiled and asked, "What do you want to exchange this stone for?" The owner of the stall was a curly-bearded man in his 30s. Seeing Qin Wushuang's question, he said, "Junior Marshal Brother, I'm an honest person. I heard that this Azure Frost Stone is the main material for refining Sciention pellets. I don't have many requests. I just want to exchange it for a Sciention pellet recipe." Yinfeng quickly said, "I'll give you a copy of a Sciention initial stage pellet recipe. How about you give this spiritual stone to us? What do you think?" The curly-bearded man's eyes lit up as he sized Yinfeng up and asked with some doubt, "You have the formula for the initial stage innate spirit pill? Are you going to trade or not?" Yinfeng asked cautiously. "Change." The curly-bearded man gritted his teeth and took the Azure Frost Stone in his hand. He looked at it reluctantly and gripped it tightly. "Give me the pill formula in one hand and the Azure Frost Stone in the other." Yinfeng took out the Sciention initial stage pill formula and said, "You can either copy it with a brush and ink or write it down yourself. I want to keep this pill formula for myself." The bearded man nodded. "I'll make a copy." Immediately, he took out the brush and ink that he had prepared beforehand. His brush moved like a dragon and snake as he quickly copied down the raw materials, refining methods, refining instructions, and so on. Only then did he nod his head in satisfaction. "This Azure Frost Stone is for you." After saying that, he straightforwardly handed it over. Qin Wushuang smiled faintly, but didn't say a word. Of course, he could see that this Yinfeng was smart. The pill formula he had given was for the initial stage innate spirit pill and not for the body sculpting pellet. It was because the main ingredient for the body sculpting pellet was this Azure Frost Stone. If that guy saw that the Azure Frost Stone was indeed the main ingredient for the body sculpting pellet, perhaps this deal would go back on track. Thus, the pill formula he had given was for the initial stage innate spirit pill. Indeed, this move was effective. When that curly-bearded man saw that the main ingredient for the initial stage innate spirit pill was not the Azure Frost Stone, he handed over the Azure Frost Stone without hesitation. After leaving that stall, Qin Wushuang could clearly feel that Yinfeng was extremely excited. Apparently, he did not expect that this deal would go so smoothly. After a few steps, Qin Wushuang suddenly stopped. He heard a series of hurried footsteps coming from behind, quickly approaching the two of them. "Hey, the 2 junior brothers in front, hold on." Yinfeng looked back and saw 7 or 8 disciples of the Stargaze Palace wearing core disciple robes had surrounded them with quick footsteps. As soon as Qin Wushuang saw this situation, he knew that Yinfeng had exposed himself during that deal. There was the so-called saying of not showing off one's wealth. Since you had exposed the upper sky pill formula, it was no wonder that others were coveting it. He remained calm and wanted to see how this Yinfeng would deal with it. "Junior Marshal Brother, I heard that you have the recipe for the Sciention pill?" A wretched-looking man with narrow eyes approached with a smile on his face. "Although the Stargaze Palace emphasizes on earning our own living, we are all in the same boat. We should share the good things. Why don't you take out your formula and let us all make a copy?" Inwardly, Yinfeng was on alert. Of course, he would not give out the formula for free. There is no such thing as a free lunch in this world. If they wanted the formula, they must take out something good to trade. Or else, it would be impossible for him to give out the formula. "Senior brothers, if you want the formula, you can take out what you have. If it's suitable, I will not be stingy in a fair trade." Yinfeng answered in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. The corners of the small-eyed man's mouth twitched. It was obvious that he was mocking them. He looked left and right a few times and repeatedly gave a signal with his eyes. The 7 fellow disciples all took a few steps closer at the same time, shrinking the encirclement a little. Each of them had a malicious smile on their faces. Yin Feng's face turned cold. What is the meaning of this? Meaning? You don't understand? There are 8 of us here, and each of us want to share. There are only 2 of you. What right do you have to talk about a fair trade? Yin Feng glanced at Qin Wushuang. He was not nervous at all because he had fully experienced Qin Wushuang's power. With such an upper sky realm warrior next to him, these lowly guys would not pose any threat. Robbery? That would be asking for trouble. So, you intend to bully us with your numbers and snatch the formula? Yin Feng asked in a deep voice. Haha, if you cooperate obediently and are willing to let us make a copy, at most, it can be considered an exchange, not a robbery. But if you don't know what's good for you, I'm afraid the nature of this matter will change. They did not hide their tyrannical attitude at all. Looking at these guys' expressions, they were obviously unscrupulous and completely intended to bully with their numbers. Senior brother Qin Wushuang. Yin Feng looked at Qin Wushuang awkwardly. Qin Wushuang nodded and asked indifferently, Are you guys from the same sect? Or a motley crew that got together at the last minute? Brat, are you scolding us? Damn it, Brat. It seems like you don't want to do this the easy way. Brothers, shouldn't we show these 2 brats some power? Qin Wushuang smiled coldly. Upper Sky Pill formula, we really do have it. But with just a few pieces of trash like you, I'm afraid you don't have the qualifications to have it. After saying that, he lifted his foot slightly and took a step forward. When he stepped out this step, Qin Wushuang had deliberately used his upper sky power. As soon as he stepped down, a giant hole had appeared on the ground. Like a spider web, the stone tiles on the ground had shattered and extended to each person's feet. Whoever wants the formula, feel free to come and get it. Qin Wushuang laughed mockingly and waved at Yin Feng. Let's go to the front and take a look. With this move of his, the 8 people were instantly petrified. They were tongue-tied and couldn't say a word. Their previous courage and arrogance were instantly deflated like a punctured balloon. Upper Sky, too strong. Luckily, this Upper Sky has a good temper. These people suddenly woke up and looked at Qin Wushuang's back with lingering fear. They were indeed glad. In this situation, if it was another Upper Sky disciple, they would have at least lost an arm or a leg. Yin Feng followed behind Qin Wushuang in shock. He was envious, admiring, and fascinated. This was the Upper Sky realm. He did not need to speak any nonsense. With just one step, he had intimidated a group of vicious tyrants like wolves and tigers into becoming stone statues. This was pressure, the prestige of an Upper Sky. Yin Feng was deeply moved and looked at Qin Wushuang with eyes full of admiration. No matter how he looked at it, this young man was much younger than him, but he was already an Upper Sky and was even a disciple of the second palace master. The gap between people really can't be compared. Comparisons are odious. Yin Feng lowered his head and thought, I shouldn't bite off more than I can chew. This senior brother Qin is someone I can only look up to. I'm already very satisfied to be able to have a relationship with him. It's impossible to be on the same level as him. While thinking, he quickened his steps and followed. Senior brother Qin, your character is really good. If it were other Upper Sky disciples, those people from last time and this time would have suffered a great loss. Qin Wushuang said with a light smile. After all, we are fellow disciples of the Stargaze Palace. Since they are useless, I cannot follow them. Even if I beat them up, I would not gain anything. Yin Feng was filled with respect. He looked at Qin Wushuang with much more admiration. Yin Feng had seen many Upper Sky disciples. Each of them had their eyes on top of their heads and did not even bother to speak. When they talked to the Pre-Sky Realm disciples, they used their noses to speak. Even if they had to speak, they would look up to the sky and try to keep their words short. It was as if it would be an insult to speak one more word or look at the other party. They had already reached the end of the first level of the trading platform. If they continued forward, they would reach the second level. However, there was an entry requirement for this second level. Yin Feng stopped and said hesitantly, Senior brother Qin, to enter the second level of the trading platform, You need to pay a deposit. It's much more formal. What? Qin Wushuang raised his head to look. The more formal it was, the more he wanted to see. I am afraid I am not qualified to enter. Yin Feng mumbled. To enter the second level, you need to pay a deposit. This deposit requires at least upper sky treasures. However, I don't have any upper sky treasures. Yin Feng only had some materials to make the upper sky golden pellet. However, they could only be counted as quasi-upper sky treasures and not finished upper sky treasures. Follow me. Qin Wushuang did not speak another word and continued to walk forward. Today's update. Begging for monthly votes. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chijian.com. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 161. The trading platform on the second floor, whether it was trading items or trading scale, was far more impressive than the trading platform on the first floor. Thus, to enter this second-level trading platform, one needed to show a deposit. This deposit was only a form of proof of qualification. It could be returned after the trade or when one left the place. To put it bluntly, there was no commission for the trade. Paying the deposit was only to prove that the person had the qualification to trade. It was also to prevent them from playing any tricks during the trade. When he walked to the trading platform, Qin Wushuang took out the upper sky blade and the wind and thunder blade technique he had acquired from Li Wuji as payment. Yin Feng passed through the gate and said gratefully, "Senior Brother Qin, I am truly grateful that you allowed me to see the second-level trading platform. No need to thank me. Since we came together and we made a promise, I am only doing what I promised. I'm only following the agreement," Qin Wushuang said lightly. However, Yin Feng knew that the other party was trying to lighten his psychological burden. He immediately said, "I have collected all the materials for the body sculpting pill. I will give some to you. I calculated that the materials I have collected can be used to make it 5 times. Let's count it as 5 portions. You take 2, and I take 3. What do you think?" Qin Wushuang said with a smile. "Okay." When Yin Feng saw that he had agreed to take it, not only did he not feel distressed, he was overjoyed at the turn of events. He knew that when an upper sky disciple agreed to take your goods, it was a favor. It meant that he had acknowledged the relationship between the two. Qin Wushuang was not pretentious. He did not have those so-called upper sky arrogance. When he interacted with people, he valued their intentions the most. He would never form a deep relationship with someone who harbored evil intentions. If they had a good intention and were worth befriending, even if they were not as strong as him, Qin Wushuang would not reject them. Although this Yin Feng had some petty thoughts, he was clearly a person with good intentions. And as a pre-sky realm disciple, he had collected all the materials in these few years. Apparently, he had his own tricks. Such a figure had potential. Qin Wushuang had the intention to guide him and build some connections in the Stargaze Palace. Indeed, the second-level trading platform had a grand scale. Everywhere one went, there were many good things. Yin Feng was dazzled when he looked at it. However, he was self-aware. Even if he knew these things, he was just looking at them. Currently, it was thousands of miles away from him. It was not something he could think about. "Senior Brother Qin, do you want to set up a stall?" Yin Feng asked cautiously. Qin Wushuang smiled and said, "We'll see." For the time being, Qin Wushuang did not feel that he needed to exchange anything. He didn't lack cultivation techniques. Medicinal pills didn't seem to be of any use to him at the moment. He already had a storage bag, but it was too precious. Even core disciples might not have it. Even if they did, it was unlikely that they would take it out to trade. As for defensive upper sky weapons, he already had a set of armor. It was a reward given to him by the higher-ups of the Stargaze Palace. As for innate weapons, Qin Wushuang also had 2, the innate battle blade and the snake-shaped soft whip. Moreover, they all came with cultivation techniques. Therefore, Qin Wushuang couldn't think of anything he needed for the time being. If there's a sword-shaped innate weapon, I can consider changing it. The sword is the king of all weapons. Among all the weapons, it's the most suitable for me. Qin Wushuang thought about it this way. Up to this point, he had never practiced any upper sky weapons. After exchanging blows with the black-clothed man, he realized that he really needed a handy weapon when fighting in close quarters. Pay attention, pay attention. Just as Qin Wushuang was wandering around, a voice emerged from the high platform. Everyone, pay attention. In this annual Vientiane pageant, besides trading, of course we must have a grand finale. This year's grand finale is the gambling competition. Those who are willing to participate, please go to the backstage to register. The rules for this competition are the same as before. Based on the quality of your goods, we will arrange your opponents. Those who are willing to register, please go to the backstage to register and present your goods. Gambling competition? Qin Wushuang frowned. What's that? Apparently, Yin Feng only knew part of it. He had participated in this Vientiane pageant for a few years. However, each time, he would only wander around the outskirts. In the end, he would be able to feast his eyes and watch this gambling competition. However, he had never been qualified to participate. When he heard Qin Wushuang's question, he hurriedly replied, "This gambling competition is anonymous. It is said that those who register will have to pay a wager. After passing a review, the wager will be qualified. Only then will the wager be listed. The organizer will divide the wager according to the value of the wager that everyone has paid. All the wagers of similar value will be placed in one arena. Then, the final champion of that arena will be decided. The champion will win all the wagers with interest. This gambling competition only recognizes the final winner. As long as the others are not the final winners, they are all losers." Yin Feng paused, then added, "This is equivalent to cutting off everyone's meat and enriching the final winner. Therefore, although this gambling competition is very attractive, disciples who are not confident in their own strength, even if they're upper sky, may not participate. Even if they do, the value of the wager won't be too high. This is because the higher the value of the wager, the more intense the competition." Qin Wushuang's heart skipped a beat. He thought, this gambling competition is quite interesting. The final winner will earn a lot of money. When he thought here, he had the idea to give it a try. Currently, I have 2 flame cloud vultures in my bag. I can use one of them as a wager and sign up. Of course, I will be happy if I win and happy if I lose. It will be a good experience. There are many upper sky disciples here, and the flame cloud vultures are only initial stage spiritual beasts. Their level is not high. I think the competition will not be too intense. When he thought here, Qin Wushuang had already made up his mind. He said, "I will go take a look. You stay here and look around. Before I come out, don't make any trades to avoid getting bullied." Yin Feng was also interested when he knew that Qin Wushuang was going to participate in the gambling competition. He nodded. "Okay, senior brother Qin will go. For sure, you will win." Qin Wushuang laughed and walked in large strides. After he turned around the mountain pass, he arrived at a high platform. A temporary camp was set up there, and many people were already loitering outside. Apparently, they were all Stargaze Palace disciples who wanted to sign up, but were hesitant. When Qin Wushuang walked to the side of that camp, a Stargaze Palace disciple stopped him. "Do you want to sign up for the gambling competition?" "Not here," Qin Wushuang asked with a surprised tone. That disciple took 2 steps back and made a pleased gesture. At the same time, he said, "Once you go in, you must sign up. Or else, please don't go in recklessly." Qin Wushuang smiled lightly and walked in. Inwardly, he thought that if he did not sign up, should he come and join in the fun? Inside the camp, there were a few disciples who were hosting this gambling competition. They were all exceptional figures among the core disciples of the Stargaze Palace. Among them, that young master in yellow robes was Wei Yi, the direct disciple of the head palace master. Among all the young disciples in the Stargaze Palace, he stood out like a crane among a flock of chickens. It was rumored that he was an elite warrior at the middle stage of the spiritual martial force. Among the young generation of the Stargaze Palace, he was without a doubt the leader of the dragons. Wei Yi sat in the middle, with 2 young disciples on each side, naturally serving him from left and right. One of the young girls wore light yellow clothes, had a graceful figure, and a pair of eyes that were as bright and clear as autumn water. At first glance, she looked like an immortal. Qin Wushuang felt slightly amazed as he walked up. No wonder Wei Yi was the leader of all the upper sky disciples as he laughed. Another junior brother has entered the upper sky. Congratulations. Junior brother, are you also here to sign up for the gambling competition? As soon as this Wei Yi spoke, Qin Wushuang felt a deep sense of respect for him. He clearly felt that the upper sky presence from this person before him was on par with that old devil Ji'in of the Ji'in mountain. For your information, old devil Ji'in was an old devil who had been famous for more than 100 years. In this way, he did not seem to be more than 30 years old. Yet, he was at the same stage as old devil Ji'in. It was enough to show his talent. Yes, may I ask, is this the place to pay the bet? Although Qin Wushuang was impressed, he was not afraid. He dared to oppose old devil Ji'in with equal harshness. Naturally, he would not hold back before his fellow disciples. When Wei Yi saw that this young junior brother did not recognize him, he could not help but smile. However, he did not get angry and said kindly, "This is the place. What do you want to pay?" Qin Wushuang took out the inner core of a flame cloud vulture and said, "This is the inner core of an initial stage spiritual beast of the fire attribute. Is it enough to sign up?" Haha, as long as it's an upper sky object, it's enough to sign up. Besides, the inner core of a spiritual beast is not common. It's completely qualified. Wei Yi smiled and pointed to that fairy-like disciple next to him. Junior sister Zhou will be in charge of collecting the bet. Just give it to her. Qin Wushuang walked over in a refined and courteous manner. Senior sister Zhou, this is my bet. The girl surnamed Zhou nodded slightly. Okay, this bet is anonymous. After you pay the bet, go get a mask and a set of betting ropes. Then, wait in the Wanxiang Valley. When there are 8 people of your level, the competition will start. 2 against 2, 8 to 4, then 4 to 2, and the last 2 to kill each other. The winner will be the final champion. The other 7 people's bets will belong to the champion. Do you understand? Qin Wushuang nodded. I understand. Good. Your bet has been received. 1 inner core of a flame cloud vulture. We will consider putting all the applicants for the inner core category into one list. This girl with eyebrows was called Zhou Fu. She was actually also a disciple of Tan Zhongqi. She was also one of Tan Zhongqi's proudest disciples. Only, at this time, she didn't know that Qin Wushuang was her junior brother. And Qin Wushuang also didn't know that this senior sister, Zhou, came from the same line as him. After he had taken the bet items, Qin Wushuang did not linger and walked out directly. He knew that he had signed up early. Thus, he would have to wait for a while to gather 8 people. When she saw Qin Wushuang walk out, that Zhou Fu laughed lightly. Such an interesting little guy. Senior brother Wei, he doesn't know you. He called you senior brother. Haha. Wei, he rubbed his nose and smiled bitterly. He also doesn't know the number 1 beauty of the Stargaze Palace. Junior sister Zhou? It seems that he is a new junior brother. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 162. That Zhou Fu smiled without showing her teeth. She looked outside with her limpid eyes and laughed. Even if you are a new junior brother, you should know the number 1 of the young generation in the Stargaze Palace. Senior brother Wei. Wei, he waved his hand. Junior sister Zhou, don't make fun of me. How could I be considered the number 1 of the young generation? It's still early. How could not be counted? Currently, among the 96 core disciples in the Stargaze Palace, only you have entered the middle stage, right? If you are not number 1, who would dare to call themselves number 1? This Zhou Fu did not speak with a flattering tone, but with a somewhat serious tone. Wei Yi said modestly, "That's because I started early and had some natural luck. After 10 or 20 years, for sure, there will be junior brothers who will catch up and surpass me. With junior martial sister Zhou's talent, perhaps she will surpass this foolish brother in 20 years. Zhou Fu raised her eyebrows slightly and shook her head. Senior brother Wei, don't make fun of me. I know very well how much talent I have. I am satisfied as long as I did not embarrass my teacher. I never thought that I would catch up to senior brother Wei, who has the natural spiritual roots. Although Zhou Fu said these words, inwardly, she still did not want to admit defeat. She thought that she had enough talent and hard work. Only, her luck was not as good as Wei Yi's since she did not have the natural spiritual roots. If she did have a natural spiritual roots, she believed that she would not be less than Wei Yi. However, the path of training was cruel. Some people were born with a golden spoon in their mouth. Even if others chased after them for their entire life, they could only run behind them and never catch up. Wei Yi laughed. The end of the year exam is coming. Perhaps, this time, your teacher will have a few more core disciples. I heard that your teacher had taken in a martial arts student exam champion. He has great talent. Perhaps, your teacher's line will shine brightly. Zhou Fu said with a yearning tone. I also heard about it. Only, I never had the chance to go down a mountain. On the day of the Laba festival, I must meet this new junior brother. Of course, he will not be bad. Even my teacher is impressed by your teacher's vision. Zhou Fu's admiration for Tan Zhongqi was unconditional. She nodded. That's right. In the Stargaze Palace, only the head palace master is better than my teacher. As for the other palace masters, when she said this, she did not continue. Instead, she giggled and teased herself. Let's not talk about this anymore. If we continue, they will be in a bad mood. Hee hee. The them she spoke of referred to the other junior brothers present. They were the disciples that the palace masters were most proud of, including Wei Yi and Zhou Fu. There were a total of 5 people. They were the 5 disciples that the palace masters were most proud of. This was a tacit understanding between the most outstanding disciples. Qin Wushuang left the camp, and as soon as he stepped out of the door, he was surrounded by a group of Star Luo sect disciples who were patrolling the perimeter. One by one, they asked with concern, Junior brother, how is it? Is senior brother Wei Yi in charge of the registration? Qin Wushuang smiled and said, if you want to know, why don't you go in and sign up? He did not know who was Wei Yi's eldest senior brother, so naturally he could not answer this question. After leaving the camp, Qin Wushuang returned to the trading area on the 2nd floor. Yin Feng had been waiting there for a long time. Seeing Qin Wushuang come out, he hurriedly asked, Senior brother Qin, how was it? Waiting for the notice. I've already signed up. Yin Feng's eyes immediately revealed a look of worship, sighing, Senior brother Qin is really young and promising. I don't know when I will have the qualifications to experience this gambling competition. I believe it will be very interesting. Qin Wushuang smiled faintly. Suddenly, he glanced to the side and saw a stall. Impressively, there was a simple and unadorned ancient sword with a dark purple blade displayed there. Whether it was the sword body or the sword hilt, the shape was not exaggerated. But from afar, there was a kind of strong and simple feeling, as if it was an old man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life. It had a simple charm that made people not dare to underestimate it. Qin Wushuang looked at the sword, walked over, looked at it for a moment, and asked, this sword, is it for exchange? The owner of the sword was a young man in his 20s, with dark skin and a simple and honest appearance. He nodded, it is for exchange. Glancing at Qin Wushuang, he cautiously added, but if the conditions of the exchange are not met, I will definitely not exchange it with you. Name a price. Qin Wushuang did not show too much enthusiasm. Can you afford it? The simple and honest young man looked at Qin Wushuang and asked suspiciously. He saw that Qin Wushuang was so young, even younger than himself, so he naturally had some doubts. Yin Feng smiled and said, if this senior brother can't afford it, then no one else can. Is that so? How come I don't think so? The simple and honest young man said somewhat carelessly. Then he thought for a moment and said, I want this saber, and it must be accompanied by a corresponding saber skill. After a pause, as if he felt that his price was not enough, he added, I also want a Dan recipe, not an elementary Dan recipe, but a middle Dan recipe. Yin Feng looked at him and smiled. This senior brother, I see that you are not an innate master, yet you don't want an elementary Dan recipe, but a middle Dan recipe? Aren't you biting off more than you can chew? The young man said in a muffled voice, what do you know? I already have Chuling's pill formula, and if you want exchange, then take out what I want, or else. This violet sun sword, I will definitely not give it away. Qin Wushuang suddenly asked, Nourishing sun sword? Forgive me for being presumptuous, but this sword shouldn't be yours, right? It also shouldn't be passed down from your sect. The young man impatiently waved his hand. You don't need to care about this, since it is on me. It is mine. I have the absolute right to exchange it. If you can afford it, then don't worry, no one will come to you to ask for it back. If you can't afford it, then please step aside. Qin Wushuang nodded, not taking it seriously, and said, Put away the sword. I will exchange this sword. You're exchanging it? The honest young man obviously thought that Qin Wushuang could not afford this price, so he did not expect the exchange to be successful. But he did not expect that Qin Wushuang would actually want to exchange, and in such a straightforward manner. I'm exchanging it, Qin Wushuang said, but my saber and saber skill are all at the entrance. I can only exchange it with you after we leave. That won't do. Who knows if you're lying to me? Without the real thing, I will not exchange it. The honest young man hugged the violet sun sword to his chest, looking like a rare commodity worth hoarding, which was quite funny. Yin Feng was not happy. I say, you are really stubborn. Exchanging it sooner or later is the same. If you want to see the real thing, you can go to the entrance and check. Then you have to come with me. Otherwise, even if there's that thing, how can it prove that it is yours? Qin Wushuang smiled. Put away your stall. Let's go now. The honest young man hesitated for a moment, obviously fascinated by the saber and saber skill, and emphasized, Let's agree. It must be an innate for an innate. If you use an acquired weapon and saber skill to deceive me, then this exchange will still not count. Qin Wushuang sighed. Don't worry, I can't deceive you. When they arrived at the entrance, Qin Wushuang explained the situation, and the disciple in charge of accepting and mortgaging was very cooperative. After checking Qin Wushuang's entrance certificate, he took out the saber and saber skill and placed them on the counter. Is it these two? Yes. Qin Wushuang waved to the honest young man. This is the saber and saber skill. Take a look and see if they are genuine. When the young man saw the innate saber, his eyes immediately lit up. This was because the saber was emitting a very obvious innate aura, and its shape was very imposing and fierce. It was very eye-catching. Not to mention the name of the saber was also very good. Thunderwind Saber. Good name, good saber, everything is good. The honest young man nodded with satisfaction. Okay, this saber and saber skill it is. But let's agree, you can't leave out the pill recipe, or else I won't exchange. This guy was very principled. Although he liked the saber, he didn't forget his own interests at all times. Qin Wushuang smiled bitterly. I won't shortchange you. He then said to the disciple in charge, Senior brother, I want to exchange for 2 items. Is that possible? As long as it is an innate item, it is completely possible. Qin Wushuang nodded, and still didn't touch the items from the black-clothed man. Instead, he took out the mental cultivation method of the thunder palm of the sky and the pill recipe of the dragon and tiger body sculpting pill. When he took out the dragon and tiger body sculpting pill, he said to the honest young man, This is the pill recipe you need. I can let you make a copy now, or you can write it down yourself. That guy didn't stand on ceremony. He grabbed a pen and paper and made a copy. Qin Wushuang waited for him to finish before he put away the pill recipe and handed it over along with the thunder palm of the sky. This is my new collateral. 2 for 2, exchange for this saber and saber skill. Okay. After the inspection, the disciple exchanged the items. Qin Wushuang held the innate saber and the thunder wind saber skill in his hand, weighed them in his hand, and said, Can we exchange now? That honest young man reluctantly handed over the violet sun sword and muttered, Why do I feel like I'm still making a loss? Yin Feng's lungs were about to explode from anger. You're still making a loss? 3 for 1. What are you making a loss for? Don't act like you're innocent after getting a bargain. You don't know anything, you just like to shout blindly. That honest young man's face was full of disdain. Although this sort of mind doesn't suit me, I dare to conclude that it's definitely not an ordinary item. If it wasn't for the fact that I especially like sabers, I wouldn't exchange it. You've already exchanged it. Even if you regret it, it's useless. Yin Feng was still indignant. Qin Wushuang held the violet sun sword in his hand and couldn't put it down. Whether it was the feel of the sword, the degree of fusion, or the first impression, Qin Wushuang was very satisfied with it. Regardless of the two's quarrel, he felt that he really made a big profit this time. That saber and saber skill were basically useless to him. He only let the other party make a copy of the pill recipe, so he didn't lose anything. To be able to exchange for such a mysterious ancient sword, it wasn't a loss. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 163. Carefully putting away the violet sun sword, Qin Wushuang walked forward again. Along the way, Yin Feng still felt that he had made a loss. He muttered, "Senior brother Qin, that guy seems honest. Why do I feel like he's still trying to act innocent after getting a bargain?" Qin Wushuang laughed. "That's because you feel that 3-for-1 is too much of a loss." "Isn't that a loss?" Yin Feng was very confused. With senior brother Qin's innate status, as long as you put in a little pressure, you would probably be able to get this sword, even if it's just a pill recipe. Qin Wushuang sighed. "If it were an outsider, I might have done that. Between fellow disciples, it's better to keep the goodies within the family." Yin Feng was startled and thought about it. He couldn't help but admire Qin Wushuang even more. It's really rare to see someone who doesn't bully the weak these days. This senior brother Qin is really a rare person with both integrity and talent. After walking a few steps, a call came from above. "Fellow disciples who have registered earlier, please gather at the arena. We have gathered 8 contestants for the first round of the single elimination tournament. Please gather at the arena immediately." "Senior brother Qin Wushuang smiled. "I've already placed my bets. Wouldn't it be a loss if I don't go?" As he spoke, his footsteps quickened as he walked toward the arena. The arena was set up at a high point between the second and first level of the trading platform for all the disciples who came to the Wanxiang Valley to watch. This gambling arena had always been the finale of the Wanxiang Valley. It was also because of such a big show that it attracted even more disciples to join in the fun. It was also the reason why the Wanxiang Valley became more and more lively every year. Qin Wushuang arrived at the side of the arena and put on his mask and gambling attire. He saw that the other 7 contestants had already arrived at the side of the arena. The 7 of them stood there with an imposing aura. They were all innate disciples, and all of them didn't hide their innate power at all to suppress their opponents and stand out from the crowd. The competition between innate disciples could be said to be a fight for every inch of land. These 7 people hadn't even gone up the arena yet, but they were already competing. Qin Wushuang was secretly amused, but he wasn't that bored. They hadn't even drawn their lots yet, and it wasn't clear who they would be fighting with. If they rushed to show off, wouldn't that be like winking at a blind person? Seeing Qin Wushuang walk up the stage, the host announced loudly, "All 8 contestants. Next, the first step is to draw lots from number 1 to number 8. Every contestant has a number. In the first round, number 1 against number 8, number 2 against number 7, number 3 against number 6, and number 4 against number 5. The victors of the first round would fight each other again. After 3 rounds, the victors would be crowned the champion of the first round of a single elimination tournament. The winner, the bets of the 7s, the winner will. Around the arena, thunderous roars resounded throughout the mountains and plains. Clearly, many people had not come here for any transaction at all. Instead, they had come here for the grand finale of the show. In the world of the strong, nothing was more attractive than a martial arts show, and nothing could make them so fascinated. The host smiled and waved his hand, indicating for everyone to quiet down. After the crowd quietened down, he smiled and continued, "The bets of the 8 contestants in the first round of the competition are not ordinary. After careful selection by the organizers, we have chosen 8 bets of similar levels to form one group. There are a total of 3 groups in this round of competition, and this is the first group. Does everyone want to know what the prizes are in this group?" Yes. Almost in unison, they answered with a voice that shook the heavens. and the power was terrifying. It made the contestants' blood boil. The bets were what they cared about the most. The 8 contestants only knew the bets they signed up for, but they didn't know what the other 7 had bet. All of them stared at the host, waiting for him to announce the bets. After the host had whetted their appetite, he smiled and said, "I believe the bets this time will make all the contestants' blood boil. They are the inner cores of the spiritual beasts corresponding to the 5 basic elements: gold, wood, water, fire, and earth. Each of the 5 basic elements will have 1 to 2 initial stage inner cores. In other words, all 8 contestants have bet the inner cores of initial stage spiritual beasts. Although the 3 basic elements are repeated, they belong to different spiritual beasts. I believe everyone has an idea of the effects of these 8 inner cores, right? Even 1 inner core of a spiritual beast was extremely rare, not to mention 8. Moreover, it was 8 Nadins that gathered the 5 basic attributes. Although they were only initial stage inner cores, the value of 8 initial stage inner cores with all 5 basic elements would not lose to a middle stage inner core. After all, it was better to have a complete set. If it was used to make an upper sky initial stage pill with all 5 basic inner cores, the upper sky initial stage pill could definitely nurture an upper sky seedling with unlimited potential. In the future, it would not be difficult for him to enter the middle stage. In the training of the upper sky realm, the more balanced the 5 basic elements were, the more potential one had. It could be said that it was an attempt at training. Thus, when these people heard that all 5 basic inner cores had been gathered, they were extremely envious. Each of them was fascinated and wished that they could be one of the contestants. Unfortunately, this was destined to be a game between the elite disciples. Most likely, ordinary disciples would not even have the qualifications to participate, not to mention the competition. After all, inner cores were something that could only be encountered and not sought. Although there were some initial stage spiritual beasts in the Cloud Mountain range, most of them were still active in the virtuous Cloud Mountain range. For these outer disciples, the probability of encountering an initial stage spiritual beast was less than 1/10 of the virtuous Cloud Mountain range. After walking for 2 months, Qin Wushuang had only met the 3 flame cloud vultures that the man in black used to fish. He did not even see any footprints of a natural spiritual beast. 5 basic attributes. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang had initially treated this competition as a form of experience. When he heard the stakes, his desire to win had instantly become the main theme. The first thought that came to his mind was to win these bets. Apparently, the reaction of the other contestants was similar. Between their brows, they did not conceal their fanaticism as they rubbed their fists and got ready to fight. When that host saw the contestants' expectant expression, he did not delay and laughed. "Come up one by one and grab your number." Remember, in this competition, it's best to only determine the winner and loser and not life and death. Whoever cannot hold on, do not force yourself. Or else, don't blame the opponent for being merciless if you lose your life. Although the rewards were good, their lives were more valuable. It was not easy to reach the upper sky realm. If they lost their lives in this competition, it would not be worth it. Thus, there was no need to remind them, as they all knew what to do. As they took turns to go up, Qin Wushuang realized that he and number 6 were fated. This time, he still caught a number 6. He remembered that during the martial arts student exam, he had also caught a number 6. Number 6 opponent was number 3. After hanging the number on the competition uniform, each contestant's opponent was clear. Qin Wushuang noticed that number 3 was a giant and muscular guy. When he stood there, he appeared to be a crane in a flock of chickens. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang estimated and felt somewhat confident. Although this guy had a ferocious appearance, he walked the path of toughness. Among the upper sky realm, it would be difficult to go far with only toughness. Most likely, even Li Wuji was not as good as such opponent. Naturally, the current Qin Wushuang was not someone to be afraid of. The arena area was huge. It was about 2 or 3 acres and was divided into 4 areas. That host said, "The 8 contestants will be divided into 4 pairs and enter your area. In the first round, Each of you must fight in your own area. Whoever leaves half a step from their area will lose. If two people leave at the same time, both of you will be disqualified. The opponent in the next round will have a bye. Naturally, no one would be stupid enough to break the rules. Besides, these 4 areas were already big enough. There was no need to worry about not having enough space and not being able to perform. Qin Wushuang jumped onto the 3rd area. That big guy number 3 had been waiting for a long time. He was clenching his fists, and the bones in his body were constantly making good sounds as crisp as fried beans. It was as if he was demonstrating his strength to Qin Wushuang. Qin Wushuang was secretly amused. In a battle between Upper Sky Realm experts, it would be too funny if they relied on street tricks to scare people. Standing 10 meters away, Qin Wushuang carried the Violet Sun sword on his back. He did not use his weapon. Instead, he crossed his arms and smiled. "Big guy, don't be so cocky. Be careful not to dislocate your joints." Contestant number 3 grabbed his messy hair and crossed his fists. With a shout, he hammered his chest 3 times and suddenly punched the ground. Earth Fiend Fist. With this shout, his fists had already landed on the ground. The ground immediately trembled violently. A spider-like crack quickly spread to Qin Wushuang's feet. Qin Wushuang kicked off with his feet. His body was as light as a swallow, and he was already floating in the air. Rolling in the air, he suddenly raised his hand. That soft whip had already flown out from his sleeve. A dazzling white light bloomed in the air. Like a coiling python, it coiled towards contestant number 3. The speed and technique of this coiling whip were not something that contestant number 3 could compare with. Contestant number 3 simply did not have any time to react. It had already coiled around him tightly like a dumpling. Qin Wushuang lightly shouted, "Rise!" With a sudden surge of spiritual power, the mountain-like big guy was pulled into the air and directly fell off the stage. The strength of this circle and throw was just right. With a shake of the whip, the big guy fell off the stage. With a loud bang, contestant number 3's huge body had already made close contact with the ground. He fell down in a sorry state. At this time, the other 3 areas had not even started fighting. The winner of the battle area number 3 had already been decided. This was Qin Wushuang's strategy. He wanted to gain the upper hand by a show of strength. He wanted to gain the upper hand by a show of strength in the arena. He wanted to gain the upper hand in the next round, and even the opponent after that. He had succeeded. This move could almost be said to be an instant kill. Although it was an instant kill, his opponent had indeed lost. And the loss was without any suspense. Cheers and applause instantly resounded throughout the entire Nature Manifestation Valley. It was too exciting. Everyone had already seen such an exciting scene in the opening battle. How could there not be a wave of applause? To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 164. Qin Wushuang gained the upper hand by show of strength and immediately won the cheers of the audience. After winning, Qin Wushuang walked down the stage and waited for the other 3 duels to be decided. According to the rules, his next opponent would be between number 2 and number 7. Therefore, after Qin Wushuang walked down the stage, he began to observe the duel between number 2 and number 7. Understand the opponent in advance. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will not be defeated in 100 battles. Between these 2 people, they were really evenly matched, going back and forth, fighting to their heart's content. Qin Wushuang watched for a moment and already had some confidence in his heart. In terms of individual combat ability, these 2 people were about the same as Li Wuji, but they lacked Li Wuji's valiance. When the 2 of them fought, they were relatively conservative. Although this kind of arena competition generally did not determine life and death. But if there was no valiant spirit when fighting, the momentum would definitely be greatly reduced. Qin Wushuang felt that it was absolutely not a problem to take down such an opponent. After watching for a moment, he no longer paid attention to it. Just as he was about to turn his head to look at the other two duels, there was already a battle over there. The one who won was number 8, and the one who was defeated by him was number 1. Looking at number 8's calm and composed appearance, it was obvious that he won relatively easily. Although he was wearing a mask, when Qin Wushuang looked over, that number 8 also just happened to look over at Qin Wushuang. Obviously, number 8 was also quite concerned about Qin Wushuang, this potential opponent. Qin Wushuang, taking the lead, also made number 8 somewhat fearful, and could not help but take a few more glances. Qin Wushuang saw that his gaze was strict, but he was not the slightest bit afraid. They calmly looked at each other for a moment, and then elegantly moved away. When the arena competition began, in the camp outside the arena, several of the most outstanding second-generation disciples were also seriously watching the competition on the arena. Especially Wei Yi, although he was recognized as the strongest of the younger generation, he was the most serious at this time, watching without blinking. His eyes lit up when he saw Qin Wushuang throw his opponent out of the arena. Zhou Fu could not help but exclaim, "Senior Wei, this number 6 is really not bad. He should be the young junior brother who handed in the Flame Cloud Vulture earlier, right?" Wei Yi nodded. Looking at his figure and temperament, it should be him. "Junior martial brother, you look really young, but I wonder which branch you are from." Zhou Fu smiled and said, "Senior martial brother Wei, seeing this junior martial brother's wonderful performance, I really feel a bit nervous." It seemed like he really couldn't slack off. Every generation had new talents. If you're not careful, you might be overtaken by your junior brothers and sisters. Her words sounded like she was spurring herself on, but in fact, she was pointing at something. Wei Yi could tell that junior sister Zhou Fu's words were meant for Wei Yi to hear. As the only innate spiritual root of the younger generation, Wei Yi could be said to be the most doted on in the sect. However, Zhou Fu's personality was soft on the outside but strong on the inside. She was very competitive. Therefore, the meaning of these words was obviously to use the name of this young junior martial brother to blow the wind for Wei Yi to hear. However, Wei did not bat an eyelid. He smiled and said, "Junior sister Zhou's words are reasonable. On the path of cultivation, only by studying hard every day can one sleep soundly at night. As the saying goes, if you sail against the current, you will fall behind if you don't advance." Just as he was speaking, number 8 on the stage also cleanly knocked his opponent off the stage. When number 8 and Qin Wushuang looked at each other, Wei Yi smiled. "These two are interesting. If I'm not wrong, these two should be fighting for the final championship." The corner of Zhou Fu's mouth twitched, but she said, "I feel that number 8 may not be a match for number 6. "Oh, what makes junior sister Zhou think so?" Wei Yi asked with a smile. "There's no reason, just intuition." Zhou Fu smiled lightly. I think number 8 is better," Wei Yi said indifferently. Zhou Fu did not respond. After a moment of silence, she suddenly said, "Senior martial brother Wei is number 8 from the head palace master's branch." Previously, Zhou Fu was also one of the people in charge of the registration and selection. Besides Qin Wushuang, this newbie, some of the slightly famous core disciples knew each other well. Zhou Fu was a meticulous person, and of course, she had noticed this detail. Now, hearing Wei Yi speak with such confidence, she could not help but feel uncomfortable inwardly as she blurted it out. Wei did not expect that junior sister Zhou would ask this directly. Since Zhou Fu had asked this question, it would not be honorable if he denied it. At the moment, he said with a smile, "Although he is wearing a mask, and I am not completely sure from his body and methods, he should be 9th junior brother from my teacher's branch." The branch of the head palace master had 16 core disciple spots. They had 4 more spots than the other 4 palace masters. And the ranking of the Stargaze Palace had always been set according to the year-end exam. Currently, Wei Yi was the head senior martial brother. If he ranked 2nd in the year-end exam, then he would have to give up his position as the head senior martial brother. He could only be the 2nd senior martial brother. Of course, under normal circumstances, when the strength of the core disciples increased steadily, there would not be much difference between their rankings. Basically, the possibility of a shift would be small. Especially among the strongest, they were the ones who could see through all the other mountains. Even among the core disciples, they were the most outstanding. It would be difficult to shake their position. Hearing his words, Zhou laughed and did not speak anymore. Inwardly, she thought that, of course, he would hope that his junior brother would win. I wonder which line this number 6 belongs to. He is so unlucky to have met the line of the head palace master. Basically, he could only accompany the crown prince. Indeed, it will be difficult to win. It will be easy to compete on the arena, but I am afraid of some outside tricks. Zhou had hosted this kind of challenge tournament a few times. Of course, she knew some inside information. On the surface, this arena competition was absolutely fair. However, in fact, some people would form cliques and use some outside tricks to win. Although Zhou did not want to do such things, it did not mean that others would not do it. She also knew that with Wei Yi's figure, most likely he would not do it. However, the line of the head palace master had many elite warriors and 16 core disciples. They were famous for sticking together and would not allow the disciples from the other lines to be in the limelight. After all, the absolute controller of the Stargaze Palace was the head palace master. In any detail, they must fully highlight the prestige and position of the head palace master. Just when all the core leaders of the camp were occupied with their own thoughts, the 2 remaining pairs on the arena had also determined the winner. Number 2 had won against number 7 with his last move and entered the second round. He had become Qin Wushuang's opponent. On the other side, number 4 had won against number 5 and entered the second round with number 8. According to the rules, there would be a break between each round. This break was 2 hours. After all, it was a battle between upper sky warriors. After a tough battle, 2 hours of rest was a short time. Qin Wushuang already had a general understanding of all his opponents. He quietly came to a corner and sat down to adjust his state of mind and his sea of qi. He knew that the opponents in the next round were only a warm-up. They would not pose any real threat to him. The real opponent would be the one in the final battle. Basically, if nothing unexpected happened, the opponent for the championship in the last round should be number 8. That opponent with equally outstanding strength. Now, Qin Wushuang had already started to prepare for the last round. That number 8 is powerful and on par with me. I must leave some backup plans. For the next round, I will still use the snake-shaped soft whip. If necessary, I can try the Violet Sun sword and familiarize myself with this ancient sword with rich upper sky presence. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang was as calm as an ancient well. Before a big battle, he could always remain strangely calm. He would never think too much about winning or losing. Most of the time, he would think about how to deal with the enemy and how to defeat them. Soon, 2 hours had passed. Qin Wushuang floated onto the arena. Entering the second round, there were only 2 matches left on the arena. Thus, the size of the arena had doubled and gave them more space to perform. Contestant number 2 had gone through a tough battle. Although he had 2 hours to adjust himself, he still had not recovered to 100%. Even if he was in perfect condition, Qin Wushuang did not see him as a strong opponent. Not to mention that he was in a slightly flawed state. Qin Wushuang glanced at his opponent and smiled faintly. If I were you, I would not choose to come on the arena. Winning or losing is important, but as the saying goes, fists and feet have no eyes. Number 2 said angrily, "Put away your psychological tactics. If you want to win against me, let me see how much real talent you have." Qin Wushuang knew that he was putting up a strong front. He smiled and said, 3 moves. If I let you survive 3 moves, then I'll consider myself to have lost this duel. Qin Wushuang purposely used his upper sky presence to activate his voice. This voice radiated in all directions, forming sound waves that continuously rolled out. Like waves after waves, they gushed out. This could be said to be a warning to the opponent. On the surface, he was speaking to number 2. In fact, he was provoking number 8 with his temperament and forming a form of psychological suggestion. Indeed, as soon as he unleashed his temperament, thunderous applause emerged from all directions. Apparently, Qin Wushuang's move was very impressive. They thought about his previous tyrannical manner, in which he had thrown the enemy off the stage in one move. And this time, he had promised that he would lose if he did not win in 3 moves. Such temperament, such domineering temperament was what most disciples of the Stargaze Palace admired the most. Of course, it was better to use one's hands than 1,000 words. Before Qin Wushuang had finished speaking, he already shook the snake-shaped soft whip in his hand. Under the effect of his spiritual power, the long whip coiled and slithered towards Nye Tian like a giant python. It formed a whirlpool-like force that lashed out at number 2. That number 2 knew that Qin Wushuang was powerful. How could he dare to neglect? He waved the broadsword in his hand with both hands and swept it towards the long whip. This horizontal slash of the sword also carried an astonishing temperament. Qin Wushuang shouted, "Good move." Suddenly, he shook the soft whip and poured his spiritual qi into it again. Suddenly, the entire long whip straightened and formed into a perfectly straight long stick. Then, he swept it with a momentum. Midway, he changed his move and used the soft whip to compete with number 2's broadsword with his spiritual qi. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.qitian.com. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 165. Qin Wushuang's change of moves was very sudden, and he had a good grasp of the power. It could be said that he had stolen the essence of that man in Black's moves. Only, in actual combat, Qin Wushuang had more presence and power than that man in Black. This was related to Qin Wushuang's Grandmaster presence from his previous life. Even now, when he had entered the upper sky spiritual martial force, each of his moves still had the presence of a Grandmaster. This change of move appeared to be as light as a feather. However, the sweeping power that surged out instantly made that number 2 feel his blood roiling. His body was like a lone boat, and this wave of power from Qin Wushuang was like a surge of turbulent waves crashing over. Although they were both at the upper sky realm, he realized that the upper sky power he had unleashed was much weaker than his opponent. Boom! The 2 weapons clashed. The sweeping power of the long whip smashed onto the broadsword and made a muffled sound. With a dang sound, that broadsword was shaken out of his hand and flew into the sky. Qin Wushuang smiled coldly and shook the long whip again. Like a poisonous snake, it wrapped around number 2's neck. He asked lightly, "How is it?" 2 moves, to be exact, 1.5 moves. That number 2's face was ashen as he said stubbornly, "I had used too much spiritual qi in the previous battle. Or else, I would not have lost to you so easily." To a defeated general, Qin Wushuang would not beat a drowning dog. He smiled lightly. "If that's the case, I'll look forward to the next time we have a chance to spar. Now, you should get off the stage." He moved his arm and released some power. The long whip brought out a wave of gentle pushing force and sent number 2 off the stage. When number 2 landed, he did not have any momentum. It was as if he had jumped on the spot and landed easily. This time, he finally understood how terrifying his opponent was and how much more powerful he was. Regardless of the power or the distance, his opponent's move had reached the realm of subtlety. He had done it so easily. When he thought here, he accepted his defeat wholeheartedly. 2 moves. Qin Wushuang's stunning performance once again won him cheers from the audience. Even the most picky audience was convinced by Qin Wushuang's methods and bearing. As for the many core disciples who were watching from the shadows, they were constantly using their own abilities to verify this battle. They were comparing their gains and losses to determine who was stronger between them and number 6. In the end, many core disciples had no choice but to admit that this number 6 was indeed strong. However, this arena competition concealed one's identity. Thus, for the time being, it was impossible to know which faction this person was a core disciple. Of course, almost all the spectators regarded Qin Wushuang as a core disciple. Only the core leaders of the various factions in the camp knew that this number 6 was not a core disciple, but a newly promoted senior disciple. Yin Feng was conflicted. He knew that one of the 8 contestants was senior brother Qin. However, as a Hotian warrior, he was unable to determine which one was senior brother Qin. After the first round ended, he thought, senior brother Qin did not come out to find me. He must have advanced. I wonder if senior brother Qin can pass the second round? With senior brother Qin's strength, he should be able to win. Yin Feng did not know much about Xiantian realm masters. However, after seeing Qin Wushuang fight several times, he admired him very much. Moreover, he saw a kind of temperament on Qin Wushuang. It was a kind of grandmaster's temperament. It was not just a high-profile, pretentious person. It was not just a person who played aloof and killed decisively. When Qin Wushuang sent number 2 out of the arena, number 8 also finished off his opponent. The remaining 2 contestants on the arena were the final contenders for the championship. It was almost exactly as everyone had guessed. Number 6 against number 8. Fight for the championship. The winner of the battle would receive 8 initial stage inner cores, which would allow them to gather all 5 basic attributes. Thinking of this, many Hotian warriors almost drooled with greed. Yin Feng kept praying in his heart. I hope that senior brother Qin is one of these 2. I hope that the final winner is senior brother Qin. After interacting with Qin Wushuang for a while, he was very impressed by Qin Wushuang's temperament. Faintly hoping that Qin Wushuang would win was a bias towards an acquaintance. But deep in his heart, he hoped that after Qin Wushuang won, he would share one of the inner cores with him. In that case, he would have gathered all the main ingredients. Thinking of this, Yin Feng's blood almost boiled. His body could not help but tremble slightly. This scene was seen by a disciple beside him. He could not help but mock. Brother, why are you trembling? Is there a brother on the arena? Yin Feng said seriously, one of my senior brothers is also participating in the arena challenge. He has not come out yet. He must be one of the final 2 contenders. Haha, sorry for the disrespect. May I ask which faction you are from? Which palace master is he a disciple of? Generally speaking, those who were able to participate in the competition for the championship were basically those from the 5 great palace masters factions. Although those Shakyamuni and elders also had core disciples, they had a limited number of spots. They could not compare to the 5 palace masters. A Shakyamuni only had 2 spots for core disciples and 1 for an elder. Thus, basically, the final winner of this arena competition would be the elite warriors under the 5 palace masters. Although there were other possibilities, there were next to none. Hearing the other party's question, Yin Feng's face turned red. He wanted to boast that he was a disciple of the 2nd palace master. However, in the end, he could not bring himself to do it. He twitched the corner of his mouth and did not answer. In the second round of competition, there were not many glints and shadows of swords. Without any suspense, both Qin Wushuang and number 8 defeated their opponents with swift and decisive moves. Apparently, these 2 had already reached a mutual understanding and saw each other as their final opponent. Qin Wushuang did not plan to waste the 2 hours of adjustment time. He found a secluded corner and started to prepare for this last battle. For this time, Qin Wushuang was determined to win the championship of the arena. Suddenly, Qin Wushuang had an idea. Around his body, 4 waves of upper sky qi appeared in his senses almost at the same time. Each of these 4 waves of upper sky qi was extremely powerful and showed their extraordinary strength. Who is it? Qin Wushuang stood up alertly. Although this was the Nature Manifestation Valley, and the Stargaze Palace forbade their disciples from killing each other, it did not mean that Qin Wushuang would let his guard down completely. Don't worry about who we are. I have some advice for you, but I don't know if you will take it. Oh. Qin Wushuang remained alert and did not answer. In the next championship round, you must go up and lose. If you choose to lose, you can get 2 inner cores from the spoils of war. This voice was obviously suppressed and deliberately changed, making it sound very hoarse. A threat, another threat. Qin Wushuang did not get angry. Instead, he laughed. It was not the first time he had encountered such threats. Initially, during the family class evaluation in River County of the Bayou Country, he had also encountered such threats. At that time, It was the last battle for the wealthy class seat. His opponent was the Sioux, and the person who had threatened him was the Shi Min feudal lords. At that time, Qin Wushuang did not compromise. This time, Qin Wushuang also had no reason to compromise. His principle was simple. It was the 4 words his teacher Tan Zhongqi had emphasized: do not pass on your responsibility. Tan Zhongqi had warned him. The great Luo Empire had precious resources. Once something good appeared, he must not be modest. If he had the strength, go ahead and take it. His opponent was number 8. His strength did not deter Qin Wushuang. Thus, he had no reason to give up the competition and get scared by 1 or 2 threats. When he thought here, Qin Wushuang calmed down and asked lightly, "Did that number 8 ask you guys to come? You don't need to worry about that. In other words, if you give up, it will benefit you. If you don't give up, in the future, you will not be able to move an inch in the Stargaze Palace." Qin Wushuang sneered lightly. Not able to move an inch. He glanced around and said sternly, "Even if you guys have the ability to make it difficult for me to move an inch, today's battle only has 4 words. Do not pass on your responsibility. If I am not skilled enough, I have nothing to say when I lose in the arena. If you wanted to give up without a fight, you guys are wrong." After he had finished speaking, he laughed and shook the long whip in the air. Then he swept 3 big circles in the air, and waves of air ripples spread out. The ripples caused the surrounding grass and trees to break and the leaves to dance in the wind. Qin Wushuang's imposing manner was like a rainbow. He moved his feet and rushed to the outside with a whistling sound. While he walked, he let out waves of clear whistles. He was sure that for sure, these 4 people had come to threaten him with dirty tricks. If his fellow disciples knew that there were so many dirty tricks behind this arena competition, it would be strange if this competition could continue. Thus, when he let out waves of clear whistles, it carried rolling sound waves and shook the entire mountain. Like the sound of thunder, it reverberated and caused the entire valley to boil. Indeed, those 4 people did not expect Qin Wushuang to be this cunning. Inwardly, they all cursed Qin Wushuang and ran away together. These 4 people were all core disciples to the line of the head palace master. Usually, they like to stick together. Now, when they saw that Qin Wushuang was a formidable opponent to their 9th junior brother, of course, they did not want the fertile water to flow into the fields of an outsider. Thus, they came to threaten Qin Wushuang. They wanted to use the power of the 4 of them to intimidate Qin Wushuang. Only, they did not expect that they had made the biggest mistake by counting on Qin Wushuang. Qin Wushuang had a lofty and unyielding character. He hated it the most when people threatened him. And these 4 people just happened to violate this taboo. Just when Qin Wushuang was running away from this place, a beautiful figure had appeared at the place where he stood. It was that Zhou Fu. She looked at Qin Wushuang's departing figure and seemed to be deep in thought. Carefully sensing, she could already feel 4 or 5 residual innate qi. Zhou Fu murmured, as expected. But I wonder if that junior brother was intimidated by them and took the initiative to leave? While she was deep in thought, she suddenly heard a hearty greeting from behind. "Junior sister Zhou, why are you loitering here?" Zhou Fu did not need to turn her head to know that this person was the number 1 disciple of the head palace master, the strongest to the younger generation. Originally, I planned to update at 5 today, but during the day, I made some arrangements for the following plot, which affected my writing plan. Thus, I will update at 4 today. I will update at 5 tomorrow to repay everyone's support. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 166. Inwardly, Zhou Fu was moved. Yet, on the surface, she remained calm and said, "I felt something strange here and rushed out to see. It seems that I am too late." Wei Yi laughed casually. "What strange thing could there be? It's just a few core disciples, isn't it?" Zhou Fu knew that with Wei Yi's ability, for sure, he knew what had happened better than her. Clearly, he was pretending to be stupid by asking this question. At the moment, she did not expose him and said with a meaningful tone, "Earlier, senior brother Wei thought that number 8 would be the final winner. It seems you have the foresight." "Oh, what do you mean?" Wei continued to pretend to be stupid. Zhou Fu smiled lightly and did not answer. She turned around and walked towards the camp. She was almost certain that those 4 or 5 upper sky chi were gathered by the core disciple from the line of the head palace master. They were pressuring that number 6. To her, these tricks were no longer news. Only, the line of the head palace master had the advantage in numbers, and their strength had suppressed the other lines. Plus, the other lines were fighting with each other openly and secretly. Thus, under the pressure from the line of the head palace master, they did not have any room to maneuver. Inwardly, Zhou Fu felt somewhat unsatisfied. However, she could not show it on her face. If she did, it would not bring any benefits to Wei. Only when Zhou Fu's figure had walked far away, Wei clapped his hands. After a moment, a few figures scuttled out from the dark and surrounded Wei. Each of them said respectfully, "Senior brother, previously, was that number 6 here?" Wei asked lightly. "Yes, we already warned him." One of them said. "What did he say?" That person said with a somewhat angry tone, "That kid seems to not know his place. He acted like a newcomer and did not fall for our tricks." From his tone, it seems that he would not give up. Wei thought for a moment. Not giving up? Even if that's the case, number 9 might have a chance to beat him. Today, you guys should not act recklessly. I think that girl Zhou Fu is already suspicious. In the future, everyone should control your actions. Don't give the other lines the chance to suppress them. "Yes, senior brother." Those 4 people answered at the same time. One of them still felt somewhat unsatisfied. "In the Stargaze Palace, our line should stand out. Why should the other lines fight with us? Eldest martial brother, it is also because you are so modest. Otherwise, even if that girl Zhou Fu knew, so what? Could it be that the second palace master still hopes that their branch can suppress our branch?" Wei, he waved his hand. "These things, it's enough to know in private. There is no need to put on the table. You guys can leave first." Yes. Those few people were obviously very afraid of Wei, their eldest senior brother. Hearing his orders, they left one after another. Wei thoughtfully looked in the direction where Qin Wushuang left for a moment and suddenly sighed. He turned around and walked towards the camp. 2 hours finally passed under the anticipation of the crowd. The arena finals that everyone had been looking forward to were finally about to begin. Number 6 versus number 8, a showdown between 2 powerhouses. I'm really lucky this year. The first group arena was already so exciting. This trip was truly worth it. Senior apprentice brother Liu, do you favor number 6 or number 8? Of course it's number 6. Number 6 skills and bearing are obviously not on the same level as the others. Great minds think alike. I also favor number 6. Someone at the side was unhappy when he heard this. Number 6 only knows how to act cool. The one with real strength is number 8. He's low-key and restrained, a real expert's temperament. Haven't you heard of the saying, "A full bottle does not shake a clear bell"? What does that mean? It means that number 6 is half a bucket of water. Other than acting cool and pretentious, that's all. In front of a real expert, he'll definitely show his true colors. Jealousy, can you tell? He's simply jealous of number 6. Acting cool? If you have the ability, why don't you show it? Pretentious? If you have the ability, why don't you go up and show everyone? If you have the ability to show off, that's called awesome. If you don't have the ability to show off, that's called stupid. Yin Feng had been listening in the crowd. He was now trying hard to recall number 6 and number 8. Looking at their styles, he could faintly deduce that if senior apprentice Brother Qin hadn't been eliminated, then between the two, number 6 temperament was closer to senior apprentice Brother Qin's. Number 8, on the other hand, seemed a little colder. Just as the group of people were gossiping, the time had arrived. Contestant number 8 had already gone up the stage. The host waited for a moment, but didn't see Qin Wushuang appear. He shouted, "Contestant number 6, please come up." After a moment, there was no response. The host shouted again, "Contestant number 6, please come up quickly." Still, there was no response. The arena was empty except for number 8's figure. The corner of number 8's mouth moved slightly. Obviously, he was a little complacent, as if he had vaguely guessed something. The disciples below the arena couldn't sit still. What's going on? He's actually late for such an important final? Doesn't he have a sense of time? One of them complained with a belly full of complaints. He late? I think he's afraid. Nonsense, with his skills. What reason does he have to be afraid? If he's not afraid, then come up. This sentence made those who originally supported number 6 speechless. They all looked around, waiting for number 6 to suddenly appear out of thin air. Outside the camp, the core leaders also walked out of the camp. Especially Zhou Fu. Her expression was solemn. She still did not give up and hoped that number 6 could withstand the pressure and come out. However, the reality had made her expectations drop. In the end, she had slowly lost all hope. Inwardly, she thought, it's not his fault. Under the intimidation of so many upper sky core disciples, as a newcomer, it's a wise choice for him to withdraw. It would be unwise if he didn't make that choice. Although she thought this way, Zhou Fu still felt uncomfortable inwardly. She always hoped that someone would not fear authority, would not fear threats, and would fight for benefits openly. From the bottom of her heart, she still did not wish for the line of the head palace master to monopolize everything. It would not benefit the development of the Stargaze Palace and would not be a good atmosphere. On the other hand, Wei Yi had an indifferent expression. Behind this indifference, there was a trace of detachment. It was as if he was not interested in this championship battle. Inwardly, his thoughts were the opposite of Zhou Fu's. He hoped that young man would withdraw and not come out. This way, it would show the deterrence of their line. The host shouted 3 times and did not see any trace of number 6. Just when he was about to announce that number 6 was late and disqualified, suddenly, a continuous whistling sound emerged from outside the arena, like a long dragon flying in the sky. Qin Wushuang's figure arrived as if he was riding on the clouds. After a few ups and downs, he dropped onto the stage. He cupped his hands in a salute to that host. "Sorry, I'm a step late." That host was somewhat displeased. If you were a step late, even if you came, you would not be qualified to compete. Please announce the start of the competition. Qin Wushuang said lightly. That host nodded. In this competition, we will decide the champion of the first group of the competition. The winner will receive the predetermined bet, 8 inner cores of initial stage spiritual beasts. I announced the start of the final competition. Following the departure of the host, only Qin Wushuang and that number 8 were left on the stage. Qin Wushuang appeared calm and composed as he fixed his gaze on this number 8. Suddenly, he smiled and asked, "Are you surprised?" "Surprised?" Number 8 frowned. "It's not that I don't want to fight. I'm just waiting for the right time. In fact, if I wanted to fight, the host didn't need to urge me 3 times in a row." Qin Wushuang still had a smile on his face, as if he was reminiscing with an old friend. "What's the right time?" Number 8 frowned even more. He knew that his opponent was playing a psychological game. But the problem was that he had doubts in his heart when his opponent spoke the first sentence. This doubt had become a gap. If it was not filled, this gap would definitely affect his state of mind during the battle. "You must have thought that I definitely won't fight. I didn't show up for a long time just to cooperate with your mentality and encourage it. I made you feel that the threats of those people just now were effective. When your mentality reaches a certain height, my appearance will inevitably cause a huge psychological gap in your mentality." Qin Wushuang's smile became even wider. Suddenly, his tone changed and became incomparably cold. "And this psychological gap will be the biggest reason for your defeat today." Speaking until here, Qin Wushuang pulled out a long whip with both hands. It was the snake-shaped soft whip that was wrapped around his wrist. He pointed it at number 8 from afar. 4 innate masters threatened me to withdraw from the competition. I have to say that this is your miscalculation. I don't have anything else, but I have a body of pride. The more you threaten me, the more determined my fighting spirit will be, and the more my potential will be stimulated. This is the second reason why you will lose today. He did not suppress his voice at all. He spoke frankly and confidently, sending it to the surroundings of the arena. It could be clearly heard from a few miles away, including Wei Yi and the other core leaders. Wei was slightly surprised, but his face was still calm. There was even a trace of a smile that could not be determined whether it came from the bottom of his heart. As for Zhou Fu, she could not help but nod. At this moment, she was also very gratified to be able to remain unmoved under the threat of 4 innate masters. This young man indeed had a body of pride. Before I entered the Ling Shao mountain range to train, my master had repeatedly warned me. He had 4 words that had been deeply implanted in my mind. Those 4 words were, "Do not pass on your responsibility." These 4 words are the third reason why you will lose today. After Qin Wushuang finished speaking, he suddenly urged his aura. The snake-shaped whip swept through the void, creating a series of whip shadows that wrapped around number 8. He actually wanted to make the first move to gain the upper hand. Good. The audience cheered. The exciting moment had finally arrived. This made their blood boil uncontrollably. The final battle between 2 outstanding innate masters, no matter who the final winner was destined to be a wonderful battle. P.S. Continue to ask for monthly votes. Warriors of Xinghe, please continue to work hard. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 167. Number 8 saw Qin Wushuang's imposing manner, but he was not afraid. He opened his palm, and a long sword shaped like autumn water appeared. He pointed it forward 3 times, and 3 cold sword flowers pierced through the void, directly passing through Qin Wushuang's attack waves, and attacked Qin Wushuang's body. These 3 sword flowers were drawn very beautifully. The angle was tricky, and the momentum was ingenious. They were actually able to break through the air currents formed by the whips that filled the sky. It was enough to show that this person had good attainments in the way of the sword. Of course, Qin Wushuang would not get hit by these 3 sword flowers. Like a ferocious beast, he swung the snake-shaped whip and swallowed these 3 sword flowers. With a roll of the airflow, they disappeared without a trace. Using a sword, Qin Wushuang's toes touched the ground, and he took a few steps back. He kept the snake-shaped whip at his waist, and suddenly reached into his back and pulled out the Violet Sun Sword. This sword is called Violet Sunday. I just got it today. I'll use you to test it. How about it? Qin Wushuang's tone was awe-inspiring. With the Violet Sun Sword in his hand, he only needed to form a sword sign, and immediately his aura was born. There was a faint aura of a great grandmaster. Qin Wushuang had studied sword techniques countless times in his previous life. But in this life, although he occasionally had some understanding, it was his first time actually using it against an enemy. But this first time was not the first time in the true sense of a rookie. 1 man and 1 sword, as if they had an ancient wish, as if they were destined to meet. Qin Wushuang held the sword in his hand, and the countless sword wills of his previous life suddenly came pouring in. Countless top-notch divine connection sword techniques appeared in his mind one after another. 9 solitary swords, Taiji sword, Dharma sword. Inwardly, number 8 could not help but feel somewhat angry when he saw Qin Wushuang acting so arrogantly and dared to use the sword he had gotten today to fight him. However, since the start of the battle, the other party had completely taken the initiative in terms of temperament. At this moment, the other party actually didn't take advantage of the situation to pursue and actually changed weapons midway. To him, this was a good thing. He immediately sneered and said, "The sword you obtained today is used against the enemy. Your confidence is extraordinary." Haha, it's not that I'm confident, it's just that my opponent is too weak. As Qin Wushuang's laughter faded, he suddenly thrust his sword carelessly. This sword strike was extremely ordinary. At most, it could only be considered to be average, and it didn't carry any attainments in the sword Dao at all. However, it was this careless sword strike that surprised number 8. The air current from the tip of the sword was like a rolling heat wave. Before it even reached him, he could already feel an unbearable heat rushing towards him. This sword move was Qin Wushuang's probing sword move. It was in line with the concept of no move is better than a move. Although it seemed to be a move, there were actually countless possibilities of changing moves hidden behind this sword move. If his opponent were to receive this move, then the following moves would be continuous and surging, causing him to be overwhelmed and unable to extricate himself. However, number 8 was very sensitive. He saw that Qin Wushuang's sword move was completely irregular and knew that it was a trick. He didn't take it at all, but retreated a few steps. He shook the body of the sword and swept towards Qin Wushuang at a fast speed like a swimming dragon. Surging in the air, he kept thrusting out waves of sword light towards Qin Wushuang's vital points. Humph! Number 8 snorted coldly. Every time he thrust his sword, his mouth didn't stop. He said, "My sword has defeated no less than 10 innate experts. You won't be an exception." As he spoke, his figure flashed and moved rapidly without stopping for a moment. Coupled with his body movement, his sword move was extremely fast. His moves were so fast that the onlookers couldn't see clearly the speed of his sword. Seeing this, Qin Wushuang knew that number 8 intended to win with speed and a fast sword. Compete in speed? Qin Wushuang laughed in his heart. Since my debut, I have never lost to anyone in terms of speed. This guy seems to be proud of his speed. Then I will defeat him in terms of speed. Qin Wushuang didn't hesitate. With a violet sun sword in hand, he didn't rush to attack. Instead, he kept circling number 8. Following his opponent's attack, he kept changing his steps. Immortal Lingyun's steps didn't look that amazing in terms of absolute speed. His movements and transformations within a small area were full of strangeness. This strangeness made Qin Wushuang's speed seem like a ghost. It was simply unfathomable. As a result, the spectators below the stage naturally exclaimed again and again. Number 8's sword art was indeed fast, but number 6's body movement was even faster. Not only was it fast, but it was also strange. It was strange that they couldn't predict where he would go next. This guy, where did this strange genius come from? Number 8 attacked for a moment, and he was a little anxious. He had fought with many innate experts before, but he had never met one who was as difficult to deal with as the one in front of him. When he attacked, he was like a mad tiger with astonishing temperament. When he defended, he was also watertight and could not find any openings. For such an elite warrior, he should be famous among the younger generation of the Stargaze Palace. However, how come he had never heard of such a devilish figure in the Stargaze Palace? Could it be this guy was an upper sky disciple that had just emerged recently? Outside the camp, Wei Yi still showed a calm expression. However, inwardly, he was much more surprised than before. He didn't expect that this newly emerged junior brother would be so experienced. Regardless of his body movements or battle experience, he did not seem like a newbie. He did not show any immaturity. He only had the temperament of a veteran. Senior brother Wei. Suddenly, Zhou Fu's voice sounded. "Junior sister Zhou, are you lamenting again?" Wei Yi asked with a smile. "I want to take back what I said earlier." In between Zhou Fu's brows, there was a trace of joyful smile. "Oh, today, junior sister Zhou said a lot of things. I don't know which one you are referring to. When we were outside, I said that senior martial brother Wei had foresight when we were talking about who would be the champion," Zhou Fu said with a smile. Wei could not help but laugh. "Could it be you have a new understanding? I believe that senior brother Wei has also seen through it. For sure, that number 8 will lose." When Zhou Fu said here, she paused deliberately and stared at Wei Yi with a pair of beautiful eyes. It was as if she wanted to observe his expression after hearing these words. However, Wei Yi smiled lightly. In a battle between upper sky, there are thousands of changes in the blink of an eye. I am afraid it's still hard to come to a conclusion, right? In fact, how could Wei not see through number 8's situation? It seemed that he was attacking and taking the initiative. However, He could not find any openings in the other party's body movements. If this continued, the attacking party would become impatient after a long period of fruitless attacks. If he could not suppress his impatient mentality, for sure, he would lose control of his sword intent, and the enemy would take advantage of it. Of course, with Zhou Fu's insight, she could see through this point. In a way, he was better than Zhou Fu in terms of cultivation and insight. Naturally, it was impossible for him not to see through it. Sure enough, number 8's state of mind had changed slightly after attacking for a long time without success. He urged his spiritual power again, and his long gown fluttered. Suddenly, his body movements changed again. His speed actually increased again. For a moment, there were shadows on the arena, constantly creating rows of afterimages. It was as if in a moment, number 8 had created hundreds of doppelgangers, constantly greeting Qin Wuxuang. The sword light crisscrossed, piercing the void with a pi-pi-pa-pa sound. At this moment, below the arena, everyone had already held their breaths. They knew that the battle had reached a stalemate and the outcome was not far away. Especially Yin Feng, who clenched his fists tightly. The moment Qin Wuxuang showed the Violet Sun sword, he had already recognized it and almost blurted out good. Fortunately, he still restrained himself and did not lose his composure. However, he was already overjoyed. "Senior brother Qin, hold on." Yin Feng fiercely clenched his fists. Number 8's swordsmanship was really fast, and the coordination of his body movements was also completely seamless. If it were post-liminary realm warriors like them, even if there were 20 of them, they would only be killed in a second. It was too fast, so fast that they could not see it clearly. Then how difficult would the situation be for the person involved? This number 8 has probably already reached the one with the sword stage. This sword in his hand is no different from an arm. It's too fast and too easy. The crowd exclaimed in admiration. Those who originally thought highly of Qin Wuxuang could not help but have their thoughts waver. They felt that under such a fast sword, it was impossible for number 6 to escape unscathed. However, how could the post-liminary realm be guessed by these post-liminary realm warriors? What was impossible in their eyes was full of possibilities in the post-liminary realm. Qin Wuxuang was very happy. This sword move was indeed fast, but it was only at the level of the Wind and Thunderblade. In terms of speed, it might be faster than the Wind and Thunderblade, but in terms of viciousness and killing intent, it might not be able to win against Li Wuji. Qin Wuxuang suddenly swung the Violet Sun sword, his body suddenly curling up like a tornado. The Violet Sun sword in his hand also spun, forming a ball of air that seemed to be both offensive and defensive. Like a cannonball, it rushed forward. He had already completely seen through number 8's sword intent. If he saw through the sword intent, then all of the opponent's fast sword moves were nothing more than a smokescreen. As long as he could avoid the most fatal sword move, all of the other sword moves were just for show. Ding-dang! Qin Wuxuang's Violet Sun sword moved forward, its speed peerlessly fast. This sword move was accurate and direct, without any error. It directly hit and blocked number 8's sword body. With the sword body blocked, all of the sword moves instantly lost their meaning. The main point of the competition immediately became the competition of spiritual energy. Qin Wuxuang urged 3 times, the Violet Sun sword emitting an ear-piercing Wang sword cry. With a kala sound, the light of number 8's autumn water-like sword body suddenly dimmed. Immediately, a gap that looked like it had been cut by a saw appeared in the dimness. In the collision between sword and sword, the Violet Sun sword was completely victorious. Qin Wuxuang laughed loudly. "I've already experienced your sword moves. Now experience my sword in the middle of my fingers." Finishing, he sheathed the Violet Sun sword behind his back. His 2 hands danced, his fingertips pointing, his thumbs pressing down together. 2 little Shang swords gushed out, like 2 dragons playing with a pearl, one on the left and one on the right, bringing along 2 dense sword auras, piercing forward. Number 8 did not expect that Qin Wuxuang's fingertips would be able to shoot out sword auras like attacks. He hurriedly pulled back his sword to block, but this block could only delay the momentum for a moment. Qin Wushuang's sword aura was formed. The sword intent of the coagulated sword was activated, the sword aura crisscrossing. Following the dancing of his fingertips, all kinds of sword auras came one after another, like raindrops raining down on number 8. This sword aura was comparable to a bullet. It was not something that number 8 could block at this time. After blocking 3 or 4 times, he was struck in the shoulder by a middle rush sword. Instantly, a large hole was pierced through, blood gushing out. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 168. In a battle between innate stage experts. Even if the opponent's aura was suppressed, the situation would be extremely disadvantageous, let alone being directly hit by the opponent's sword chi. Qin Wushuang's powerful sword chi directly pierced through, piercing a big hole. Number 8 immediately started to bleed profusely. His expression changed greatly, and he kept retreating. In a battle between fellow disciples, there was only victory and defeat, not life and death. Qin Wushuang succeeded in one move, but he did not chase after number 8. Instead, he condensed his sword chi and did not release it, indifferently looking at number 8. As long as number 8 struggled a little, his sword chi would greet him one after another until he lost his fighting ability. The original arrogance in number 8's eyes had disappeared at this moment, and it was replaced by doubt and panic. He did not expect that he would be defeated so thoroughly. This defeat could be said to be a complete defeat. He was completely suppressed by his opponent, and there was no hope for him to make a comeback. If it was not for the gambling competition, he would have been a ghost under Qin Wushuang's sword. How is it? Qin Wushuang suppressed his sword chi and asked indifferently. Although number 8 was wearing a mask, the bleakness in his eyes could still be seen. He smiled bitterly. The winner is the king, and the loser is the bandit. I have nothing to say. Qin Wushuang nodded and turned his gaze to the host. The host was also very tactful. He walked forward and shouted, "The champion of this challenge tournament belongs to number 6. All 8 stakes belong to number 6. After this announcement, there was a sudden burst of cheers from the audience. Those high-ranking disciples who were optimistic about number 6 all cheered with joy, and those who were optimistic about number 8 also exclaimed in low voices. Especially Yin Feng, who was beaming with joy, as if he had won this challenge tournament. He clenched his fists. He won. Senior brother Qin is really powerful. He really won. Wei Yi, who was watching from afar, frowned slightly, but did not say anything. He only looked at Qin Wushuang a few more times and felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. Zhou Fu was full of smiles and greeted. Senior brother Wei this time. It was little sister who was more accurate, right? Wei knew that Zhou Fu was deliberately making fun of him, but there was nothing he could do. This time, his faction had indeed lost, and lost both inside and outside the challenge tournament. He smiled and said, "Junior sister Zhou's eyesight has always been accurate. It's only natural that he's better than me. Let's get ready. After number 6 receives his reward, we'll prepare for the second group arena. There are a total of 3 groups, and this is only the first group. Everyone, don't slack off." Qin Wushuang, surrounded by thousands of people, came to the front of the camp. The champion of the arena tournament was always the most popular and popular. "Senior brother, can you tell us which branch you belong to?" "That's right. Tell us about it. Perhaps there are martial brothers from the same branch as you. We all admire you very much." "Senior brother, say something." The crowd of people kept talking to Qin Wushuang one after another, constantly greeting him. At this time, the curtain of the camp was pulled open and a person walked out. Indeed, it was Zhou Fu. Under the sunlight, her peerless beauty appeared even more beautiful. It made all the gossiping disciples of the Stargaze Palace open their mouths and tongue-tied. No one dared to speak a word. "What are each of you doing?" Zhou Fu scolded lightly. "The identities of the contestants in the arena tournament are confidential. If you have the skills, go up the stage yourselves. Do not disturb us. After being scolded by Zhou Fu, these disciples all showed a face of shame and retreated in shame. However, each of them enjoyed it as if it was a great honor to be scolded by a beautiful senior sister. There were even a few among them who had clearly come with the intention of peeking at the beautiful senior sister. When they saw Zhou Fu come out, they were naturally overjoyed. After being scolded by Zhou Fu, they were all beaming with joy and left in satisfaction. Qin Wushuang shook his head with a bitter smile. Inwardly, he thought that the popularity of this senior sister Zhou was not to be underestimated. Even when she was scolding people, it made them feel good. If it were any other senior brother who had spoken these words, even if these people did not dare to say anything, they would surely criticize him inwardly. However, after being scolded by this senior sister Zhou, each of them showed an expression as if they had picked up some treasure. Junior brother, please come in. Zhou Fu clearly knew what these people were thinking, but she was not angry. Other than being dissatisfied with the tyrannical behavior of the head palace master's faction, she was still relatively tolerant towards her fellow disciples. Qin Wushuang nodded and followed Zhou Fu into the tent. The spoils of war were all displayed there. Zhou Fu pointed at the jade box containing the 8 dawn. Junior brother, these 8 dawn can only be placed in this jade box to ensure that their spiritual power will not be lost. I don't know if you have any items on you that can store dawn. If you don't, you have to think of a way to prevent the spiritual power of these dawn from being lost. Qin Wushuang smiled and said, "Many thanks for senior sister's reminder. I happen to have a small storage bag. Otherwise, I would not have been able to store the dawn here as a wager." "That's true. Why didn't I think of that?" Zhou Fu smiled sweetly. "All right, don't be polite. These are all yours." Of course, Qin Wushuang would not be polite. He gathered the 8 dawn in the jade box and put them into his sleeve. The wide sleeves blocked his movements. No one could see how he had put the dawn into the storage bag. However, his move had surprised the leaders of the core disciples at the scene. Their impression of Qin Wushuang had improved a lot. Zhou Fu praised, "Good moves. No wonder you won the final championship. You truly deserve it." Qin Wushuang smiled lightly and cupped his hands in a salute. "Thank you, senior brothers and sisters. I will leave now." Qin Wushuang did not linger. He knew that the longer he stayed here, the more troubles he would face. Although he was not sure where the person that had threatened him came from, most likely it was related to the leaders here. If he had guessed correctly, these leaders should be the most prized disciples of the 5 palace masters, right? Just when Qin Wushuang was about to walk out of the tent, a person behind him suddenly asked, "Hold on, junior brother." Qin Wushuang slowly stopped and turned around to ask, "I don't know what other advice you have." The one that had asked him to stop was the most talented disciple under Zhong Wuyin, the 3rd palace master. His name was Zhao Muji. That Zhao Muji was dressed like a scholar as he said with a smile, "I have a question that has been bothering me. I dare not ask, which palace master do you study under?" In fact, the other people were all curious, including Wei Yi. They all wanted to know which palace master this junior brother that had appeared out of nowhere was studying under. Earlier, when Qin Wushuang had come to sign up, these 5 had all seen Qin Wushuang's appearance. However, they were certain that he was not from their line. Thus, they all thought he was a disciple from one of the other 4 lines. Qin Wushuang smiled calmly. After a pause, he suddenly said, "Isn't it required to keep one's identity a secret in this competition?" Stunned, Zhao Muji could not help but laugh. "That's to keep it a secret in the arena. It's to prevent people from fighting each other and affecting the unity of the disciples. A few of us don't participate in that level of competition. You could just speak your mind." The underlying meaning was that such level of competition would not attract their interest. However, this sense of superiority made Qin Wushuang even more unwilling to pay attention to him. He said with a light smile, "I am afraid someone at my level would not enter your eyes. Without my teacher's permission, I would not dare to reveal the matter of my teacher. Goodbye." After he had finished speaking, he did not wait for Zhao Muji to answer, as he stomped his foot and scuttled out. Zhou Fu could not help but laugh when she saw Zhao Muji's dumbfounded expression. "Junior brother Zhao, you are asking for a snub, right?" A trace of gloominess flashed across Zhao Muji's handsome face as he mocked himself. "This kid, don't let me find out about him." Yo, from your tone, you're planning to bully him." Zhou Fu laughed. After leaving the camp, Qin Wushuang found a remote place and took off his mask and competition clothes. He restored his original appearance and walked out from the dark after making sure that he had not exposed any flaws. He walked to the side of the arena with a swagger. At this time, the second group's competition was about to start. Currently, Qin Wushuang was not interested in watching the battle. After participating in the arena competition, he had a general idea of his position in the Stargaze Palace. Besides those few core leaders, Qin Wushuang knew that he would not lose to anyone. Just when he was about to leave, suddenly, he saw from afar that Yin Feng was looking around with an anxious expression. Apparently, he was also looking for him and waiting for him to appear. Qin Wushuang walked over and said in a low voice, "Don't make a sound, go out of the valley first. Go alone, I will follow you." Yin Feng was stunned for a moment before he realized something. After walking around the arena twice, he walked out leisurely. Qin Wushuang was not in a rush to follow him, as he also walked out at a moderate pace. When he walked to the exit, he took back the 2 upper sky treasures and followed him out. After a moment, the 2 of them left the nature manifestation valley one after the other. Qin Wushuang walked carefully along the way. After making sure that no one was chasing him, he finally felt relieved. Initially, he was worried that those people who had threatened him would not give up and continue to pester him. Now it seemed that the other party had given up. At least, they did not plan to do so. After leaving the nature manifestation valley for a few dozen miles, Qin Wushuang finally caught up with Yin Feng. Currently, Yin Feng's eyes were full of admiration and envy. "Senior brother Qin, you are really something. If you didn't show the Violet Sun Sword, I wouldn't have recognized you. I didn't recognize you at all, and I was worried for nothing." "Ah, indeed, this Violet Sun Sword is not ordinary." Qin Wushuang sighed. "Yin Feng, I plan to go down the mountain. If you trust me, give me all the materials you have on you first." At this moment, how could Yin Feng not trust him? Without even thinking, he took out all the materials he had collected, including the Azure Frost Stone, and handed them to Qin Wushuang. "Good. After the year-end examination, come to the Green Cloud Hall to find me. I will definitely give you an answer. As long as I can refine the golden physical body pill and the initial connate spirit pill, I will definitely give you a share." Yin Feng nodded. "Good. Then I will leave it to you, senior brother Qin." At this point, Yin Feng's voice could not help but choke. After so many years of hard work, he had actually realized his dream so easily this time. If he had not met a benefactor, he might not have been able to collect the main materials for these 2 upper sky spirit pills, even if he worked hard for 10 years. He had really met a benefactor this time. From the bottom of his heart, Yin Feng had already regarded Qin Wushuang as his benefactor. P.S. Today's 5 chapters update. Fighting hard for monthly votes. Brothers, please rise up and give Li Tian more motivation. Today's 5 chapters will definitely not be lacking. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chijian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 169. After going down the mountain, Qin Wushuang returned to the headquarters of the Stargaze Palace. The first thing he did was to visit his teacher at the Green Cloud Palace. There was still more than a month until the Laba Festival. Apparently, it was too early for him to go down the mountain. Thus, Tan Zhongqi was somewhat surprised when he heard that Qin Wushuang wanted to see him. "Haha, Wushuang, you look good. It seems you have gained something after not seeing you for 2 months." Tan Zhongqi said with a smile. "Tell me, what did you gain?" Qin Wushuang did not hide anything. Besides omitting some details about that man in black, he told him everything truthfully. The parts he left out were the identity plate of that man in black and that strange map. As for the other matters, he also reported them in detail. After Tanjonchi had finished listening, he frowned and said to himself, "You went to the Nature Manifestation Valley and participated in the gambling competition. Someone threatened you, right?" "Yes." Qin Wushuang did not hide anything. Tanjonchi's face turned ashen. "These bastards, they are bullying their fellow disciples. Do they really want to monopolize everything?" "Teacher, who are those people? Who else could it be?" "Their biggest leader is that senior martial brother Wei you mentioned. Wei Yi. He comes from the line of the head palace master. These guys have always pushed the other four lines aside. They want to monopolize all the resources in the Stargaze Palace." The line of the head palace master? Could it be that everything was instructed by the head palace master? Qin Wushuang found it hard to believe. The so-called king of hell is hard to deal with, but the little devils are harder to deal with. The head palace master is not like this. Among the 5 palace masters, he is a person of virtue and prestige. His disciples and grand disciples prefer to occupy mountains and monopolize them. Wushuang, among those core leaders you mentioned, one of them is from our line. Why don't you guess which one? Qin Wushuang thought for a moment and asked, "Could it be that senior sister Zhou?" Tanjonchi laughed. "How did you guess?" "Intuition, it's all intuition. I just feel that this senior sister Zhou is closer." "Yeah, don't underestimate intuition. An innate rancor's intuition is sometimes very sharp." Wushuang, for this second round of the martial arts student exam, your Baiyu country's result was not ideal. Oh, Qin Wushuang's heart skipped a beat. He had always been concerned about this matter, and hearing his master say this, he couldn't help but worry. It won't affect the promotion to a high-ranked subordinate kingdom, right? That's not necessary. You alone are enough. Everything else was just icing on the cake. This time, in your Baiyu country, besides you, only 6 people were chosen by the Stargaze Palace. As for some of the other middle-ranked subordinate countries, there were close to 10 places each. This time, the Great Wu, the neighboring country to your Baiyu, has contributed 13 spots. As a result, it was also promoted to a high-grade subordinate country. Qin Wushuang smiled bitterly. Inwardly, he thought that the battle between the Baiyu and the Great Wu would continue. Initially, he thought that since the Baiyu country had become an upper subordinate country and surpassed the Great Wu, they would show an overwhelming advantage. Unexpectedly, the Great Wu also worked hard. Now, he only cared about whether there were people he knew among the 6 spots from the Baiyu country. However, when he thought about it, the hope was slim. Besides the Qin family, there were 4 royal families in the Baiyu country. Although the Redwood King had fallen, there were still 3 royal families left. At least, the offspring of the 3 royal families had taken up 3 spots. The other 3 spots would be fought for by all the martial arts students in the entire Baiyu country. For people like the Shiyang and Tong Yin, their chances were slim. At the moment, he could not help but ask, "Teacher, who are the martial arts students from the Baiyu country that entered the Stargaze Palace?" Tanjonchi smiled bitterly. "I didn't pay much attention to this. Anyways, those martial arts students did not have high potential, and it would be difficult for them to reach my expectations. It seems that they were all chosen by the elders of the Stargaze Palace. When you have time, you should ask around. However, Wushuang, when you arrive at the Stargaze Palace, you should consider the entire Great Luo Empire, and not those little subordinate countries." Yes. Qin Wushuang also felt that it was impolite to speak these words before his teacher. "Wushuang, you have collected so many inner cores from initial stage spiritual beasts. Are you trying to make upper sky initial stage pills?" Tanjonchi suddenly asked. "That's my intention." Qin Wushuang raised his brow. "May I ask, teacher, in terms of alchemy, which faction in the Stargaze Palace is better?" "None of them are good." Tanjonchi's tone was straightforward as he sighed. "Everyone wants to cultivate and continuously achieve breakthroughs in the martial way. Alchemy is something that everyone wants to take advantage of. If you ask them to learn it themselves, none of them are willing. This way, in the entire Stargaze Palace, it can't be that we don't have a single alchemist, right?" Tanjonchi sighed. "Of course not. Currently, the best alchemist in the Stargaze Palace is from the line of Shakyamuni Lihua. Among the 8 Shakyamuni, only Shakyamuni Lihua is the best at making pills. His disciples are also diligent in alchemy. Only what? Only this Shakyamuni Lihua has a strange personality and is not easy to deal with. If you want to ask him to make pills, you will need to spend some effort. Since he is the Shakyamuni of the Stargaze Palace, it's natural for him to make pills for a disciple of the palace. In the worst case, I will pay him some commission. Qin Wushuang felt strange. Could it be that he would need to spend a lot of effort to ask the Shakyamuni to make pills? Haha, Wushuang, it's easy for you to say. Even if the 5 palace masters want to make pills, we need to talk to him, not to mention you, the younger generation. The rarer an object is, the more precious it is. If there is a shortage of alchemists, the more precious it is. Wushuang, you have 8 inner cores. Even if you use 5 of the different attributes to make the supreme quality upper sky initial stage pills, you will still have 3 left. These 3 would be enough to make 6 to 10 upper sky initial stage pills. With all 5 attributes, the upper sky initial stage pills would be of the supreme quality. Wushuang, you don't mind if I share one with you, right? Tan Zhongqi chuckled and revealed an expression as if he was trying to take advantage of him. Qin Wushuang could not help but laugh. Of course, it's my duty to show respect to my teacher. Tan Zhongqi nodded with satisfaction. Okay, you should go to the Lihua Palace and pay a visit to Shakyamuni Lihua. If he is willing to make a move, the success rate would be 100%. With 5 different attributes, at least 10 upper sky initial stage pills could be made. If you were to give it to a mediocre person, you would be thankful if he could make 3. The path of alchemy also emphasized the success rate of making pills. For someone like Shakyamuni Lihua, it would be overkill to make upper sky initial stage pills. Thus, the success rate would be high. It would be a different matter if it were a novice or an apprentice. Then I will go to the Lihua Palace to take a look. I will visit you later. Yes, go, when tested out. If it doesn't work, I will throw away my face and talk to that Shakyamuni Lihua. Qin Wushuang said goodbye and walked towards the Lihua Palace. The Lihua Palace was located on the south side of the Stargaze Palace. The overall structure of the Stargaze Palace was in the shape of a spiral. The outermost area was where the butlers and elders had their duties. The place where the butlers lived was called the Butler's Hall, and the place where the elders lived was called the Elder Pavilion. They formed an outer layer of protection. On the inner layer, there were the 8 Shakyamuni palaces. They were arranged according to the 8 trigrams. They were Qian, Kuan, Zhen, Sun, Canli, Jin, and Dui. They symbolized heaven, earth, thunder, wind, water, fire, mountain, and lake. The Lihua Palace belonged to the fire element and was located on the south side. Thus, the Lihua Palace was built on the south side. These 8 Shakyamuni palaces surrounded and protected the 5 main palaces. They formed a situation like stars surrounding the moon. Finally, the main palace stood out and pierced through the clouds. It was extremely ostentatious. Qin Wushuang left the front palace and arrived at the Lihua Palace after walking for a moment. This Lihua Palace was the territory of Shakyamuni Lihua and the #1 place to make pills. Thus, the environment was rather quiet. When Qin Wushuang approached the door, he saw a young man holding a broom and sweeping listlessly. Now, it was already winter. With the dried leaves piled up, it was not easy to clean. That young man waved the broom, and apparently, he was feeling somewhat depressed. Occasionally, he would use the broom to vent his frustration. Then, he would continue to sweep. As Qin Wushuang looked at the back of this young man, he could not help but feel stunned. He almost thought that he had seen wrongly. This young man was Tong Yao's little brother, Tong Yen, that young martial arts student who had successfully advanced with the help of Qin Wushuang. Why was he here? Or could it be that he was one of the 6 martial arts students from the Bayou country? As Qin Wushuang thought inwardly, he called out with a clear voice, "Brother Tong?" Initially, Tong Yen was feeling depressed. When he heard this call, he turned around in surprise. When he saw Qin Wushuang standing at the door of the Lihua Palace with a face full of smiles, he could not help but feel stunned. Then, His face revealed an ecstatic expression. Brother Qin. He threw away the broom and rushed over in big strides. It was as if he had seen his long-lost brother. Brother Qin. Qin Wushuang looked at this Li Hua palace, and then looked at Tong Yin's servant outfit. He was extremely confused. Tong Yin smiled bitterly. Initially, he was a person with strong self-esteem. Initially, when he had been chosen by the Stargaze Palace, he thought that he would have a meteoric rise and that his fate would change greatly. Unexpectedly, after 2 months of entering the Stargaze Palace, the only thing he had done was to sweep the floor. This made this proud young man depressed to the extreme. If he had not feared the Stargaze Palace, most likely he would have left already. When he heard Qin Wushuang's question, Tong Yin sighed with a bitter smile. I don't know if I am lucky or unlucky. I thought that after being chosen by the Stargaze Palace, I could achieve meteoric success and bring honor to my ancestors. I didn't expect that I would have the life of a servant. If I had known, who chose you? Qin Wushuang asked curiously. Shakyamuni Li Hua. Besides that old pervert, who else would torture people like this? Tong Yin whispered. He said that after entering the Li Hua Palace, I would sweep the floor for half a year. If I did well, I would become a herbalist. If I did not, I would sweep for another year. Tong Yin sighed with a bitter face. However, Qin Wushuang comforted him. Brother Tong, don't be discouraged. I heard that although Shakyamuni Li Hua has a strange personality, he is an elite warrior of the Stargaze Palace. For sure, he has his reasons for doing this. Perhaps it is a kind of test and tempering of the disciple's temperament. Stunned, Tong Yin instantly fell into deep thought. P.S. Here is the second update. For sure, there will be 5 chapters updated today. Brothers, please continue to support and throw in the monthly votes. Haha. Strive to get rid of the opponent. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chijian.com. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 170. It was no wonder that Tong Yin had lost his balance. Basically, all the martial arts students who had passed the exam twice had a place to go. They had followed their teachers to train and pass on their skills. Only he received a completely different treatment. He had been assigned the dirty and tiring job of sweeping the floor. Although Tong Yin was not a spoiled young master, he was born in an aristocratic family. He was not good at such chores and could not accept the fact that he had to sweep the floor. Before, he had thought it was such a happy thing to receive the spiritual affinity and something he had looked forward to. How glorious would it be to become a disciple of an upper sky warrior? However, who would have thought that Tong Yin had been sweeping leaves for 2 months? If this matter were to be spread by other people with ulterior motives and spread to their hometown, it would be a disgrace to their 8 generations of ancestors. Qin, how did you know I was here? I heard that you were chosen by an absolute elite warrior from the Stargaze Palace. Because of your appearance, our by you had been promoted to an upper subordinate country. You are really something. Tong Yin's tone was full of admiration and envy. Qin Wushuang laughed. I didn't know you were here. This time, I came to find Shakyamuni Li Hua to make a few upper sky pills. I didn't expect to meet you here. Indeed, it's fate. Tong Yin, do you know who else from our by you had been chosen? Prince Lan Yue from the Purple Flame Territory and the royal offspring of the Tai Yuan of Goguryeo had taken 3 spots. I was lucky enough to get one, and Simon Xing was the other one. The remaining one is an offspring of a feudal lord from the Purple Flame Territory. I think he's called Wan Jinpeng. Qin Wushuang sighed. 120 people had passed the first exam. After the second exam, only 6 people had passed. The cruelty of this competition was apparent. I heard that this time, the Great Wu had achieved an abnormal result. 13 people had been chosen. Tong Yin said with indignation. Isn't that right? The offspring of the Great Wu had been extremely arrogant after the results had come out. The 6 of us had suffered a lot. One of them had exceptional talent. I heard that our 3rd palace master had taken him in as a direct disciple. His future was limitless. Because of this reason, Those martial arts students from the Great Wu did not respect our Bayou and provoked us. Oh, then, who are the other 5 people from the Bayou? Qin Wushuang asked curiously. Heh, now that I mention it, I'm ashamed. Besides me, all 5 of them have become disciples of the elder. Tong Yin scratched his head and was slightly embarrassed. In terms of status, Tong Yin was the lowest among all the martial arts students who had entered the competition. He only came from a venerable family. As for the other disciples, they were at least from the great clans or even the royal family. Unfortunately, the scions of the great clans were only apprenticed to the elders, while the scions of the aristocratic families were chosen by the Dharmaraja. When he was chosen, Tong Yin had a dreamy look on his face. He felt that he could hold his head high and bring honor to his ancestors. Now that he thought about it, he would rather be chosen by one of the elders. If that was the case, perhaps he would be happier. Although the position of the elders was one level lower than the Dharmaraja, at least they had enjoyed the treatment of an official disciple as soon as they had entered. Unlike him, after 2 months, he could only sweep the floor. When Qin Wushuang saw that Tong Yin was somewhat disappointed, he comforted him again. Tong, although I don't know why Shakyamuni Lihua had assigned you to sweep the floor, I think there must be a deeper meaning behind it. If I were you, I would do my job well and sweep the floor. Then, I would wait for the opportunity. I only heard that gold will always shine. Since Shakyamuni Lihua had chosen you, he would never leave you here. Be patient. On the path of martial arts training, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have some bumps. Tong Yin had learned a lot as he kept nodding. You are right. I have lost my mind. Qin Wushuang nodded. I wonder if Shakyamuni Lihua is in the palace. I really don't know. Brother Qin can go in and ask other senior apprentice brothers with higher positions. Right now, I'm only responsible for sweeping the floor. After saying that, he smiled bitterly and waved the 2 brooms. I'll go in and take a look. I'll catch up with you later. Qin Wushuang smiled as he bid farewell to Tong Yin and quickly walked inside. Tong Yin looked at Qin Wushuang's back with envy. At the same time, he secretly made up his mind that he must not feel sorry for himself anymore. As the saying goes, the fragrance of plum blossoms comes from the bitter cold. He must endure loneliness. Qin Wushuang walked to the core of Lihua Palace and was blocked by the disciples guarding the door. Senior apprentice brothers, I am here to visit Shakyamuni Lihua. Please inform him. Are you here to refine pills? The disciple's tone was somewhat arrogant. That's right. Qin Wushuang did not beat around the bush. My master is not here. You can go back. The disciple lazily waved his hand. Not here. Then may I ask senior apprentice brother, when will Shakyamuni Lihua return? You really don't know the situation. The disciple glared at him. Shakyamuni is roaming the outside world. If he leaves at least 10 days to half a month, at most 3 to 5 years. Who knows when he will return? How could Qin Wushuang not see that this person was intentionally exaggerating? Whether or not Shakyamuni was really not here was another matter. Qin Wushuang pondered for a moment and knew that this disciple was intentionally making things difficult for him. He must be asking for a bribe. His expression did not change as he pretended that he did not understand. He mumbled to himself. This time, the hall masters are personally involved in the pill refinement. Since Shakyamuni is not here, I'll just go back and report the truth. This senior apprentice brother, I'll ask you one more thing. Are you sure Shakyamuni is really not here? If the hall masters ask, I'll have to report the truth. When a disciple heard the name of the hall masters, he was stunned. His expression was somewhat ugly. The hall masters are personally involved? I wonder which hall master it is. It's Mr. Tan, the second palace master. Qin Wushuang was also familiar with such tricks of borrowing someone else's power to intimidate others. He knew that as a newcomer, it would not be good to announce his name. He might as well announce his master's name. If this still did not work, then it would be strange. Sure enough, when the disciple heard Tan Zhongqi's name, his expression immediately became much more serious. He looked up and down at Qin Wushuang. You won't use these words to deceive me, right? It's the truth. Qin Wushuang said lightly. In that case, wait a moment. I'll go see if Shakyamuni has left. Let's make a deal. If Shakyamuni has left, then I can't do anything about it. Qin Wushuang smiled slightly and made a pleased gesture. He was sure that Shakyamuni Lihua was definitely in the palace. This disciple must be deliberately making things difficult for him. Apparently, he had left some leeway by saying these words. He was afraid that Qin Wushuang would expose him. Of course, Qin Wushuang knew the principle of don't expose a person's weakness and don't hit a person's face. When he saw that he had gone to report, he did not expose him. Inwardly, he sighed that his teacher's name was the most useful. It was no wonder that this disciple had changed from arrogance to respect. Tan Zhongqi, the second palace master, was famous for his iron fist in the Stargaze Palace. He was also famous for protecting his disciples. Whoever dared to offend him would only be asking for trouble. When he thought about how the old devil Jiyin was trembling with fear when he saw his teacher, it was not strange for this little guard disciple to act this way. Indeed, after a moment, that guard disciple jogged out. You are lucky that the Shakyamuni has not left. Go ahead. Whether the Shakyamuni will make pills for you or not, it's his business. Qin Wushuang cupped his hands in a salute and walked inside after thanking him. Under the guidance of an alchemy boy from the inner sect, Qin Wushuang arrived at the main hall of the Lihua Palace. Shakyamuni Lihua was sitting cross-legged with both of his palms facing up on his knees. There were two completely different flames in his palms, like two fairies jumping around his palms. One was a bright red flame, and the other was a dark green flame. Although he had made this gesture, it did not make one feel that these were two balls of flames. Instead, it was more like a whole body of yin and yang. Sit, Shakyamuni Lihua said lightly. Qin Wushuang bowed slightly and sat on a chair next to him. However, he did not speak. Instead, he looked at these two balls of flames carefully and felt impressed inwardly. Shakyamuni Lihua's moves had shown his extraordinary martial arts attainment. At least, he was an elite warrior at the middle stage of the upper sky spiritual martial force. Anyone who had entered the upper sky realm knew that at the initial stage of the upper sky spiritual martial force, it was impossible to refine the fire element into a solid form. At the initial stage of the upper sky spiritual martial force, one could absorb the power of the natural elements. However, one could not separate the natural elements. To separate these basic elements, one must be at least at the middle stage of the spiritual martial force. Looking at Shakyamuni Lihua's move, it was clearly a very pure fire element. Moreover, it was two different types of fire elements. One was yin fire, and the other was yang fire. In other words, not only could Shakyamuni Lihua separate the elements, he could also refine them into a solid form. If this was used for attack, it would be many times stronger than the spiritual qi attack of the initial stage. Naturally, the purer the spiritual qi attack, the more powerful it was. Qin Wushuang was in awe. Without making a sound, he looked and felt seriously. His fingertips could not help but feel like dancing. Inwardly, he thought, if my coagulated sword could refine the element attack and form the gang sword, then the attack power would at least increase by several times. It seems that this should be a skill only at the middle stage of the spiritual martial force. Qin Wushuang, the direct disciple of the second palace master, we've met once. Yes, when I had just entered the sect, I had met you once at the main palace. Shakyamuni Lihua nodded slightly. Indeed, the second palace master has good eyes. I still remember that time. There was a vote on whether you could directly become a core disciple. Unfortunately, that vote was before I saw you. If I had seen you, I would have voted for you. Qin Wushuang was rather carefree as he smiled. I don't care about this. It would be more convincing to become a core disciple with my strength. Now, it's not far from the year-end exam. Shakyamuni Lihua nodded. That's right. You came here today to ask me to make Dan? Please grant my wish, Shakyamuni. Qin Wushuang bowed respectfully. If you want me to make Dan, you must pass through me. If you can pass, I will do it myself. If not, you can only follow the rules and let me make it. As for the efficiency, I will not ask. Qin Wushuang was stunned. To make Dan, he needed to pass first? To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chijian.com. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 171. Although he was puzzled, he was fearless and said frankly, "Please enlighten me. There is no such thing as enlightening me. You only need to do one thing according to my instructions. If you can satisfy me, you pass this test. I will personally refine the elixir and guarantee the quantity and quality." Shakyamuni Lihua said faintly, "Open your sea of qi and draw out a stream of spiritual power. Out of the Naiwan Palace, draw it between your breasts, spread it between your heart and lungs, and finally draw it into your shoulders and into your arms, following the guidance of Shakyamuni Lihua." Qin Wushuang followed his instructions and found that this route was one of the 12 regular meridians in his body. For Qin Wushuang, operating the spiritual power like this could be said to be a homework he had to do every day. At the moment, he easily rushed the spiritual power to his palms. "How do you feel?" Shakyamuni Lihua asked faintly. "I feel two masses of hot air condensed in my palms, about to burst out." Qin Wushuang answered truthfully. If he rushed it again, it would shoot out from between his fingers. This was clearly one of the mysteries of the coagulated sword. For Qin Wushuang, this was a feeling that could not be more familiar. Shakyamuni Lihua's eyes lit up. "Try to rush it again." Qin Wushuang thought, "If you rush it again, I will release the sword qi." However, he was very smart. He knew that if he released the sword qi, it would arouse Shakyamuni Lihua's suspicion and expose all the secrets of the coagulated sword. At the moment, he opened his 10 fingers, allowing the hot air to spread out from between his 10 fingers. "Can you expel the hot air?" Shakyamuni Lihua asked. Qin Wushuang opened all 10 of his eyes and emitted dense fog. Like light smoke, it rose up in spirals. Shakyamuni Lihua slapped his thigh and could not help but praise, "Good." Qin Wushuang scratched his head in confusion as he did not understand the origin of this compliment. Shakyamuni Lihua laughed. "Qin Wushuang is the second palace master in the Green Cloud Palace?" "Yes." Qin Wushuang answered subconsciously. "Haha, I have something to discuss with him." Shakyamuni Lihua suddenly seemed to have changed into a different person. He was crazy, completely unlike his previous pretentious and virtuous self. Qin Wushuang was dumbfounded. He didn't expect that there would be such a strong contrast in the personality of a senior expert. Just a moment ago, he was still an unfathomable expert. How did he suddenly turn into a naughty playboy? "Go, go, go, come with me." Shakyamuni Lihua did not allow Qin Wushuang to say anything and dragged Qin Wushuang out. Qin Wushuang couldn't help but ask, "Dharmaraja, what about refining pills?" "Refining pills is a small matter. I'll refine them for you later. I'll do it personally, and I guarantee you'll be satisfied. But you have to promise me something." "What conditions?" Shakyamuni Lihua laughed, but did not answer directly. He just said, "Let's talk about it when we meet your master." Qin Wushuang was helpless and could only follow Shakyamuni Lihua out. Although he didn't know why Shakyamuni Lihua suddenly wanted to meet his master, but looking at his smiling face, it shouldn't be anything bad. He could only follow his instructions and quickly walked out. Those disciples of the Liefire Palace were all dumbfounded when they saw Shakyamuni Lihua laughing so happily with the junior. They simply couldn't believe their own eyes. When they walked to the door, the disciple who was guarding the door saw the situation and complained incessantly. Shakyamuni Lihua was obviously very compatible with this young man. He even lied to him earlier. Thinking of this, his scalp went numb. Luckily, Shakyamuni Lihua didn't care about this at all. He pulled Qin Wushuang and quickly walked out. When they walked to the courtyard, Tong Yin was busy sweeping the floor. When he saw Qin Wushuang being pulled by Shakyamuni Lihua, he was very surprised and couldn't help but stop what he was doing. Qin Wushuang smiled bitterly and greeted him. Shakyamuni Lihua was stunned. "You know each other?" We are from the same hometown. Qin Wushuang replied honestly. Good. Not bad. Shakyamuni Lihua nodded. After thinking for a moment, he waved his hand. You brat, don't sweep the floor anymore. Go to your senior brother and get another task. Just say that I personally asked you to do it. When Tong Yin heard this, he was overjoyed. Yes, thank you, Shakyamuni. Why are you thanking me? If you want to thank someone, thank your fellow countrymen. It's good that you are from the same hometown. Shakyamuni Lihua laughed loudly and pulled Qin Wushuang forward. Although Tong Yin was surprised, he was very happy. He threw the broom aside and walked inside. He knew that the reason why he was able to get rid of his sweeping fate was definitely related to Qin Wushuang. Although he didn't know the exact reason, at least he didn't have to sweep the floor anymore. Since Shakyamuni personally asked, his senior brother definitely wouldn't casually give him a task. Tan Zhongqi was meditating when he suddenly heard noisy footsteps outside the main hall. Listening carefully, there was also Shakyamuni Lihua shouting. He couldn't help but be stunned. Why is Shakyamuni Lihua here? Did Wushuang offend him by asking him to make pills? Is this old guy here to reason with me? Humph, isn't it just making pills? Isn't this old guy taking advantage of me too much? Don't even think about bullying my favorite disciple. Before he finished thinking, Shakyamuni Lihua had already approached him with a laugh. Master Tan, I know you are here. Tan Zhongqi pushed the door open and walked out. Seeing Shakyamuni Lihua pulling Qin Wushuang and his disciple's suspicious and embarrassed face, he was puzzled and asked indifferently, Shakyamuni Lihua, what are you doing? Did my disciple offend you? Shakyamuni Lihua heard Tan Zhongqi's unfriendly tone and couldn't help but be stunned. He immediately understood and smiled. No, I can't wait to like your disciple. How could I offend him? Master Tan, I don't come here for no reason. Today, I am here to discuss something with you. Discuss something? Tan Zhongqi remembered the last vote and was still angry. What is it? Shakyamuni Lihua smiled and said, I want your disciple to learn alchemy from me. No, Tan Zhongqi and Qin Wushuang almost said at the same time. Why not? Shakyamuni Lihua was stunned. This Qin Wushuang is very sensitive to the fire attribute and has amazing talent. He definitely has the best aptitude for alchemy. It's a pity that he doesn't learn alchemy. Hall Master Tan, the path of alchemy and cultivation go hand in hand. Isn't alchemy also a kind of enlightenment? Can it really delay his martial arts cultivation? Tan Zhongqi rejected Shakyamuni Lihua mainly because he was still angry about the last vote. Shakyamuni Lihua did not give me face and did not vote for me. Now, how could I agree to your request easily? And Qin Wushuang rejected him because he did not want to be distracted. It was because before they had left, his teacher had mentioned that none of the disciples in the Stargaze Palace wanted to practice alchemy. Inferring from this, alchemy was definitely not a proper occupation. Second Palace Master, as one of the 5 Palace Masters of the Stargaze Palace, you should know clearly that others have misunderstood. Alchemy would not only not delay one's training, but it would also promote it. Those who said that alchemy would delay one's training were simply sour grapes. They do not have the talent, yet they said that alchemy is not a proper occupation. Indeed, it's despicable. Shakyamuni Lihua felt indignant. Indeed, he must talk about this matter from 2 sides. For alchemy, if one could grasp it well and study in a targeted way, it would indeed promote one's training. At least, regarding the control of the medicinal properties and the spiritual qi, alchemists would be more sensitive. Besides, in the upper sky spiritual martial force, sometimes, to achieve a breakthrough, alchemy pills were extremely important. Alchemists lacked everything except alchemy pills. However, on the path of alchemy, it was easy to take an unconventional path. One would become completely engrossed in alchemy and neglect one's own training. They would place all their hopes on the pills and walk into the devil's trap. Thus, on the path of alchemy, there were pros and cons. There were 2 sides to it. Tan Zhongqi was extremely proud when he saw that Shakyamuni Lihua needed his help. He could not help but feel that this was a rare commodity worth hoarding. He said leisurely, I already knew that this disciple of mine had exceptional talent. Or else, how could I have snatched him away? Shakyamuni Lihua smiled apologetically. Yes, yes, Palace Master Tan, you have great foresight. You want Wu Shuang to learn alchemy from you? There are at least a few hundred people in the Lihua Palace. Isn't it a joke that you want to take a strong man from me? Shakyamuni Lihua sighed helplessly. If I could find a disciple with such sensitivity to the fire attribute, I would not have taken in those few hundred. On the path of alchemy, quality is more important than quantity. A suitable successor was much more useful than 1,000 disciples who were just passable. Palace Master Tan, if you are willing to exchange, I will immediately let all my disciples come to you. I only want Qin Wushuang, and I will be satisfied. Tan Zhongqi laughed proudly. In your dreams. Qin Wushuang smiled helplessly. These two old guys had completely treated him as invisible. Wushuang, Shakyamuni Lihua admires you very much. I am happy to do you a favor. What do you think? Tan Zhongqi asked with a smile. Qin Wushuang answered honestly. I am not interested in alchemy. I'm only determined to pursue martial arts. I do not want to be distracted. Please think about it. Tan Zhongqi nodded. See? My disciple does not want to learn alchemy. Shakyamuni Lihua. It is not that I am unwilling to part with him. Shakyamuni Lihua could not help but ask. Nephew Wushuang, don't jump to conclusions. Let me ask you, how much do you know about alchemy? I don't know anything. Qin Wushuang answered straightforwardly. Since you don't know, how would you know the profoundness of alchemy? How would you know that it would affect your pursuit of martial arts? Since the ancient times, how many of those elite warriors that have become grandmasters did not know how to make alchemy? The higher the stage, the more effective the pills will be. To put it bluntly, the further you go in the path of martial arts, the more necessary pills are. There was strong confidence in Shakyamuni Lihua's tone. Suddenly, Tan Zhongqi laughed. Wu Shuang, there's the so-called saying of having more skills. From what I know, the elite warriors in the martial arts world more or less dabbled in alchemy. For this path, you will have to walk it sooner or later. Since Shakyamuni Lihua has spoken, why not follow the advice of a famous teacher? After he had finished speaking, suddenly, Tan Zhongqi's expression turned serious as he said to Shakyamuni Lihua, I say, Lihua, it's fine if you want my disciple to learn alchemy from you. However, in the future, if anything happens in the Stargaze Palace, you must not turn your elbow to an outsider. Also, when my disciples come to you to make pills, you must not reject them. You must also ask for less commission. Shakyamuni Lihua twitched his mouth into a smile. Don't worry. In the future, your disciples will not come to me to make pills. After he had finished speaking, he looked at Qin Wushuang with a face full of appreciation. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 172. After all, Qin Wushuang had just entered the upper sky not too long ago. He was still learning many things about the upper sky. Hearing the words of Tan Zhongqi and Shakyamuni Lihua, he thought it made sense. It was never a burden to have more skills. These words made Qin Wushuang's heart beat faster. In his former world, he also carried the same thought and searched for ancient martial arts techniques. He did not use many of the techniques in his former world. However, he still enjoyed it. However, the facts proved that he had made the right choice. Now, in this world, with the hard work from his former world and the powerful memories and experience from his former world, the techniques from his former world had allowed him to easily surpass the upper sky barrier. He had almost surpassed all his peers. When he thought here, Qin Wushuang did not act pretentious as he nodded. Since my teacher has agreed and Shakyamuni Lihua is showing such great hospitality, I have no choice but to learn. Instantly, Shakyamuni Lihua's old face blossomed like an old tree. He laughed. Wise choice. Qin Wushuang, I will make you understand that the art of alchemy is boundless, just like training is full of mysteries. On the other hand, Tan Zhongqi had a plan inwardly. He He knew better than anyone that Qin Wushuang would only benefit from learning alchemy without any harm. Of course, Shakyamuni Lihua also knew this point. The reason why he had come to discuss with Tan Zhongqi was because he was worried that Tan Zhongqi would not agree. Now, when he saw that Tan Zhongqi had rejected him, he knew that this old fox did not intend to refuse from the beginning. Who would refuse such a good thing? Wushuang, don't you want to make pills? Let's go and broaden our horizons. Tan Zhongqi said with a smile. Okay, please. Qin Wushuang understood tacitly. He knew that his teacher's move was to gain something without risking anything. He could also do a favor at the same time. In the future, if the Stargaze Palace were to vote on any major matters, Shakyamuni Lihua would side with Tan Zhongqi. By the way, Lihua, you must keep the fact that Wushuang is learning alchemy from you a secret. For the time being, it's best not to be too ostentatious. Otherwise, if the people from the other factions find out, their mouths will be overflowing with saliva. It won't be good for either of us. Tan Zhongqi reminded. Shakyamuni Lihua laughed. Do I need you to remind me? After returning to the Li-Fire Palace, Dharma King Lihua directly brought Qin Wushuang to his alchemy room. He already couldn't wait to display his outstanding skills in alchemy to Qin Wushuang. At the entrance of the elixir room, several elixir apprentices respectfully welcomed Shakyamuni Lihua. Shakyamuni Lihua waved his hand. No need for formalities. With Qin Wushuang in tow, he walked straight in and instructed his subordinates. No matter who the guest is, do not meet them. Just say that I'm in seclusion to refine pills. I'll only have time to meet guests after I'm done. Yes. The alchemy room was closed. Shakyamuni Lihua walked in front of the alchemy furnace and said with a smile, Show me your raw materials. Qin Wushuang didn't hold back and took out everything. Every time he took out an item, Shakyamuni Lihua's mouth would twitch. It was obvious that he didn't care much about these items. It was only when Qin Wushuang took out the 8 elementary spiritual beast inner cores that Shakyamuni Lihua's eyelids twitched slightly. But it was only for a moment. There's a lot of stuff, but not much good stuff. These 8 elementary spiritual beast inner cores are not bad. Because you've collected all 5 basic elements, it's worth some money. Shakyamuni Lihua commented casually. Clearly, elixirs of this grade couldn't arouse his interest. Shakyamuni, how many elementary stage spiritual pills can you refine with these things? Shakyamuni Lihua smiled. That depends on what grade of elementary stage spiritual pill you're refining. If it's just an ordinary elementary stage spiritual pill, you can refine at least 30 to 40 pills with these 8 inner cores. However, elementary stage spiritual pills can't be refined in terms of quantity. If you're refining an ordinary elementary stage spiritual pill, it's just a waste of resources. 5 of them were even used to refine supreme elementary stage spiritual pills. By collecting the 5 basic elements inner cores, the elementary stage spiritual pill refined would be at least 10 times more effective than an ordinary elementary stage spiritual pill. The one who consumes it would enter the upper sky for 100%. And it has endless potential. If you were to refine an ordinary elementary stage spiritual pill, perhaps one pill could create an upper sky. However, I'm afraid you would only be an initial stage spiritual martial artist for the rest of your life. Those who use inferior elementary stage spiritual pills to break into the upper sky would not only have limited potential, but also limited strength. To be honest, the Stargaze Palace does not encourage our disciples to use elementary stage spiritual pills. At least, those disciples with exceptional talent would never be allowed to use elementary stage spiritual pills. It's because the best way to break into the upper sky is to break into the upper sky from the pre-sky realm. This way, you could train your body to the maximum and develop your potential. If you use pills to enter the upper sky through external help, your achievements would be limited since you lack the ability to develop your potential. Shakyamuni Lihua spoke frankly and with assurance. Then, he changed the topic. Of course, if it's the supreme elementary stage spiritual pill, it's a different story. The effect would not be less than breaking through on your own, or even better. Qin Wushuang nodded and asked in a low voice, "If I were to refine Supreme Elementary Stage spiritual pills, how many would I get?" 5 to 7. Shakyamuni Lihua answered without hesitation. "I will take one as commission. This is the rule and cannot be broken. Ha ha." Qin Wushuang nodded. "Then let's refine Supreme Elementary Stage spiritual pills. How about we refine the other 3 separately?" "Okay, if we refine the other 3 separately, we should be able to get 10 to 12 ordinary elementary stage spiritual pills. However, it seems that you don't have enough supporting materials. Anyways, I will give you some of these materials." After he had finished speaking, he turned around and took out the materials from each medicine cabinet. After a few rounds, he had gathered all the materials. "First, find a few books on alchemy and read through them. I will help you refine it on the spot. You won't be able to see anything from watching me refine the pills. It's because you won't be able to do it right now." Shakyamuni Lihua started to light the fire. As he spoke, he threw the materials for the physical body spiritual pill into the cauldron. After he finished lighting the fire, he started to refine it slowly. Qin Wushuang only saw that Shakyamuni Lihua's hands kept changing. From time to time, he would fan the cauldron and ignite the fire. His 2 hands were extremely skillful, and his movements were as smooth as eating. In a moment, that cauldron emitted a light sound. Boom! A burst of fire suddenly shot out. Shakyamuni Lihua stopped his hand seals and said, "It's done." Once the cauldron was opened, a jade plate held out 4 golden physical body spiritual pills. The physical body spiritual pill that used the azure frost stone as the main material was easily refined. Qin Wushuang was in disbelief. "It's done just like that?" The physical body spiritual pill is the crudest of all the innate spiritual pills. How great did you think it was? My disciples don't like to refine this kind of stuff. Shakyamuni Lihua smiled. "Then I will refine the innate elementary stage spiritual pill. This will take a bit more effort. Other than the 5 elemental spiritual pills, there are 3 more with different attributes. Since I want to refine them separately, I will have to split them into batches." As he spoke, he cleaned up the cauldron and started to refine the innate elementary stage spiritual pill. This time, the hand seals were completely different. From a method of guiding the fire to the rhythm and frequency of adding the fire, as well as the control of the fire, there were completely different rules. Qin Wushuang looked at Shakyamuni Lihua's hand seals and saw that he was extremely skilled. It was as simple as an ordinary person picking up a brush and writing. His movements were as smooth as moving clouds and flowing water. It was done in one breath, without any signs of stagnation or unfamiliarity. Qin Wushuang could not help but feel deeply moved. Inwardly, he thought, "Indeed, the art of alchemy is profound. If Shakyamuni Lihua had not immersed himself in this art, how could he be so skilled? It's the work of a master." While he was thinking, Shakyamuni Lihua had finished the first batch of 3 initial stage spiritual pills. Following that, the second and third batches were produced in the same way. Qin Wushuang was dumbstruck as he watched. He could not believe his eyes. Each of these beige-colored spiritual pills meant an elite warrior in the upper sky realm. Since Shakyamuni Lihua had done it so casually, then the Stargaze Palace should have an abundance of upper sky warriors. How come there were only 96 core disciples in the younger generation? For such initial stage spiritual pills, it seemed that Shakyamuni Lihua could mass-produce them. Shakyamuni Lihua looked at Qin Wushuang with a smile. "I know what you are thinking. Almost every alchemist apprentice that watched me make the pills had this question. Only, you were more patient than them and did not ask." "Indeed, I don't understand. It's simple. The first restriction for core disciples in the Stargaze Palace is that they did not enter the upper sky realm with the help of the initial stage spiritual pills. Those who relied on the initial stage spiritual pills were not qualified to become a core disciple. Do you understand this reason? It's because they did not have enough potential to enter the upper sky realm with the help of external forces." Qin Wushuang had already heard about it from Shakyamuni Li Hua. This is one of the reasons. Secondly, although the initial stage spiritual pills are easy to get, not everyone is qualified to consume it. And after consuming it, not everyone would have the chance to enter the upper sky realm. Even with the body sculpting pill and the initial stage spiritual pill, some people who were destined to not have the spiritual affinity could not trigger the upper sky chi. It seems that they had entered the upper sky realm, but in fact the upper sky chi would be extremely weak, and it would mean that they had found a way out. Thus, unless you realized that it was impossible to enter the upper sky realm with your own strength, you would never recommend consuming the initial stage spiritual pills. Thirdly, it's easy to get the supplementary materials for the initial stage spiritual pills. However, the inner pellet of the spiritual beast is not easy to get. If you had not participated in the gambling competition, I am afraid you would not have gotten so many inner pellets, right? It's almost impossible for ordinary pre-sky realm martial artists to get one inner pellet. The Stargaze Palace emphasizes on self-reliance. With limited resources, they would not give out the pills for free. Unless you get the inner pellet, you could only rely on your own efforts to break through the pre-sky realm and enter the upper sky realm. Finally, Qin Wushuang realized the light and understood. Thinking about it, not many people had successfully broken through the pre-sky realm bottleneck with their own strength. At least in the Bayou country, those 4 great honored warriors had not succeeded. And in this Stargaze Palace, there were hundreds of such young disciples. All of them had broken through with their own strength. This was the difference. The difference in environment had caused the difference in talent and training speed to be so obvious. When Shakyamuni Li Hua saw that Qin Wushuang was speechless, he laughed. What I said was only limited to the upper sky initial stage spiritual pills of a single attribute. That is, those were the ones from the previous batches. The supreme grade initial stage spiritual pills we are currently making are not within the scope of discussion. These supreme grade initial stage spiritual pills are rare goods. Even for elite warriors at our level, it would take a lot of effort to collect all 5 types of initial stage spiritual pills of different attributes. Thus, it's not easy to get these supreme grade initial stage spiritual pills. As soon as he had finished speaking, suddenly, the fire inside the cauldron dimmed and emitted waves of dragon and tiger roars. The cauldron opened automatically, and 7 shining upper sky initial stage spiritual pills appeared before Qin Wushuang. He had successfully made the supreme grade initial stage spiritual pills. The success rate was 100%. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang was overjoyed. Finally, he had completed the task that had been weighing on his mind for a long time. When he saw the supreme grade initial stage spiritual pills, Qin Wushuang's thoughts instantly floated back to the Bayou country and the Qin family. There, he had a knot in his heart. Finally, he could untie this knot. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. Chapter 173. Out of the 7 supreme quality initial stage pills, Shakyamuni Li Hua took 1 as commission, and his teacher Tan Zhongqi reserved 1. As for the other 3 initial stage spiritual beast cores, there were 10 initial stage spiritual pills, plus the 4 physical body golden pellets. Qin Wushuang's bag immediately became valuable. However, Qin Wushuang did not plan to abuse them. Thanks to the match on the arena, he was able to collect all 5 initial stage spiritual beast cores. That was how he got these supreme quality initial stage spiritual pills. No matter if it was a normal initial stage spiritual pill or a supreme quality initial stage spiritual pill, they were only used by pre-sky realm warriors to break through to the upper sky realm. To Qin Wushuang, these pills were not very useful. The reason why he cared so much was because of the family's interest. After the fight between Li Wuji and the old Devil Jiyin, Qin Wushuang finally understood. The family needed Upper Sky Realm warriors. Even if they could not become Upper Sky Realm warriors quickly, they had to make plans. Currently, in the family, the ones with the most potential were his brother-in-law, De Shi Ming, and his father Qin Lianshan. Both of them had practiced the martial arts given by Qin Wushuang. They had been reborn, and their power had improved by leaps and bounds. In time, it would not be difficult for them to enter Stage 9 of the genuine force. At that time, the initial stage, spiritual pill, would show its effect. Shakyamuni Lihua did not know what Qin Wushuang was thinking. He smiled and said, "Wushuang, from now on, you'll come here every night to listen to my lectures on Dan Dao. How about it?" "Okay, please give me more advice," Qin Wushuang said modestly. Suddenly, he remembered Tong Yin. "I have a question, but I don't know if I can ask you." "Go ahead," Shakyamuni Lihua said happily. "I want to know why you chose my brother Tong Yin from the same hometown. Why did you send him to sweep the floor?" Shakyamuni Lihua smiled bitterly. "That kid, I think he is smart, and he is indeed suitable for Dan making. At least, he is much more talented than my current alchemist apprentices. I wanted him to be an alchemist apprentice in the alchemy room. But when I choose an alchemist apprentice, I need to test him in all aspects. Sending him to sweep the floor was originally to sharpen his will and test his patience." As expected, Qin Wushuang nodded. "Wushuang understands." Shakyamuni Lihua waved his hand. "Forget it. In the future, when you come to listen to my lectures on alchemy, let him listen by the side. I see that you have a good relationship with him, so I'll fulfill your friendship with him." Qin Wushuang laughed. "Dharmaraja sure is easy to talk to." Shakyamuni Lihua rubbed his nose awkwardly. Qin Wushuang's evaluation left him speechless. In the Stargaze Palace, to outsiders, Shakyamuni Lihua was famous for not being easy to talk to. He was almost the most difficult person to deal with in the Stargaze Palace. Basically, no one was willing to interact with him for no reason. Now that he was praised by Qin Wushuang as easy to talk to, he naturally felt somewhat ashamed. After chatting for a while, Qin Wushuang said goodbye. Shakyamuni Lihua reminded him again, "Don't forget our agreement." "I won't forget it." Qin Wushuang walked out with a smile. When he arrived at the entrance of the Lihua Palace, he saw Tong Yin walking back and forth in the corridor with an anxious expression. When he saw Qin Wushuang walk out, his eyes lit up. "What is it, Brother Tong?" Qin Wushuang could not help but feel curious. Tong Yin waved his hand and led Qin Wushuang to a remote corner. With a somewhat serious expression, he said, "Brother Qin, I just received a piece of news. I don't know if it's convenient to tell you." "What news?" Qin Wushuang was full of questions. He knew that Tong Yan's family specialized in gathering information. Naturally, he could not help but feel curious since he had received the news with such a reaction. "I just received a secret report from my family. It said that recently, the relationship between the Baiyu and the Great Wu has become extremely tense. Because of the results of this martial arts student exam, the two sides have escalated from a war of words to a war of violence. Currently, the Great Wu is also an upper-level subordinate country, and this time they had a lot of candidates and were on par with those upper-level subordinate countries. Thus, they are extremely arrogant. Vividly, they're showing signs of suppressing our Baiyu. According to our speculation, most likely, a large-scale conflict will occur between the two countries." This news was indeed shocking. After Qin Wushuang heard it, he paused for a moment and asked, "What is the attitude of the Great Luo Empire?" This was important. If the Great Luo Empire had a firm attitude and did not allow the subordinate countries to go on expeditions, regardless of how much trouble the Great Wu could cause, they must obey. Tong Yin smiled bitterly. Regarding the expeditions between the subordinate countries, the Great Luo Empire has always maintained a silent attitude. They are even happy to see the subordinate countries go on expeditions and train their combat power. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang shook his head. This was the difference between this world and his former world. The rules of this world were cruel. They followed the primitive law of the jungle and the survival of the fittest. This did not make Qin Wushuang feel surprised. If the Great Luo Empire truly wanted to interfere, the Bayou and the Great Wu would not have been in a stalemate for so many years. Once the two countries went to war, for sure, the situation would become complicated. The Great Wu was located to the northeast of the Bayou and shared a border with the Taiyuan of Goguryeo. And the heavenly royal territory where the Qin was located was originally Prince Akaji's territory. It was located to the south of the Taiyuan of Goguryeo. When the two countries went to war, the place where the Qin was located would not bear the brunt. Only, judging from the current momentum of the Great Wu, once they had conquered the Taiyuan of Goguryeo, for sure, they would lead their troops to the south. By that time, even if the Qin did not want to get involved, they would be caught in the crossfire. Suddenly, Qin Wushuang asked, "What is the exact situation now?" Currently, the Great Wu and the few upper-level subordinate countries are calling each other brothers. I heard that some upper-level subordinate countries have boarded the Great Wu's boat and are preparing to join hands to deal with the Bayou. Currently, the martial saints of each country are already fighting openly and covertly. Although they have not shed all pretense of cordiality, apparently, they're not far from it. When Tong Yin talked about the national matters, he was quite insightful. He was also anxious. Although he would not be affected by the war between the two countries, for sure, Tong Yin's family would be affected. And in this world, each person had a strong sense of belonging since they were born. If it was within a county, they would be extremely loyal to their own clan and would support it with their lives. If it was within the country, they would be extremely supportive of their own territory. When it was within the country, they would have a strong sense of belonging and honor to their country. Country. If the country did not exist, of course, there would be no home. Tong, you don't need to spread this matter. For the matter in the Bayou, our people will take care of it. Qin Wushuang instructed. Of course, Tong Yin also understood that he could not tell anyone about this matter. With the status of the Stargaze Palace, they would not get involved with the trivial matters between the two subordinate countries. As these two walked out from a remote area, Tong Yin appeared to have a heavy heart. On the other hand, Qin Wushuang was in deep thought. He was considering whether or not he should make a trip back. Currently, there was still a month until the Laba Festival. He had enough time to make a trip back. When he thought here, he had some ideas. He said to Tong Yin, "Tong, I have decided to return to the Bayou country and see what the martial saint has to say." Tong Yin already knew that Qin Wushuang had entered the upper sky realm. Hearing Qin Wushuang's words, he was overjoyed. With an upper sky realm warrior stepping out, the situation in the Bayou country would stabilize slightly. The strategic significance of one upper sky realm and two upper sky realm warriors were completely different. Just as these two were walking out of the Lihua Palace, suddenly, a person ran over in a hurry. That person had a short stature. However, his face was full of vigor as he walked over quickly. When he saw Tong Yin, he called out, "Tong, Brother Wan." Tong Yin immediately went up to greet him. That person glanced at Qin Wushuang and felt that he looked familiar. After a moment, his face was full of surprise. Isn't this the martial arts student exam champion, Qin Wushuang? Qin Wushuang smiled lightly. "Yes, I am." The man laughed happily. "That's great." Tong Yin was stunned. "How is it great? How come you have the time to come find me?" That person was called Wan Jinping and was one of the 6 martial arts students from the Bayou country. He came from the Purple Flame Royal Territory and was an offspring of a feudal lord family. His position was similar to Simon Xing, Wan Jinping's side. "Tong, you're not relaxing here. This time, all the martial arts students we recruited were assigned as initial stage disciples and entered the mountain to train. I didn't expect that group of martial arts students from the Great Wu to deliberately cause trouble. They provoked our martial arts students a few times and were extremely arrogant because they had more people. This time, they even injured Simon Xing. They also announced that they would solve the grudge between the two countries within the Stargaze Palace. If you're a coward, then complain to the higher-ups. Or else, we will solve it the way a martial artist would." Tong Yin's expression changed again and became extremely unsightly. In a low voice, he cursed, "Darn the Great Wu, they are truly arrogant." It seems that these martial arts students had received some sort of instructions. That's why they had cooperated to provoke us. Aren't they just relying on the fact that they have twice the number of people? Wang Jinping could not help but glance at Qin Wushuang. He had also heard that a palace master had taken a fancy to Qin Wushuang. However, no one had verified this rumor. Thus, Wang Jinping did not fully believe it. Now, when he saw Qin Wushuang, of course, he was overjoyed. Qin Wushuang had entered the upper sky realm, killed Li Wuji, and forced old man Ji Yin to retreat. All these things were confidential and did not spread out. At that time, the martial saint had warned those who had watched the battle to not spread the news. Inside the Bayou country, besides those who had watched at the scene and the royal family, all the other aristocrats did not know the inside story. Not to mention the Great Wu and the other subordinate countries. If those martial arts students had known about Qin Wushuang's true strength and that he had indeed been taken in as a disciple by the second palace master, they would not have sent this challenge letter to the martial arts students from the Bayou country. Qin Wushuang's face was slightly cold as he asked lightly, "Simon Xing was injured?" "Yes." Wang Jinping answered carefully. "He was severely injured." Apparently, those martial arts students from the Great Wu had deliberately provoked us. Even with Simon Xing's personality, they had provoked him to the point of making a move. Is not an ordinary provocation. Simon Xing's personality was much more tactful than his brother, Xi Minqian. He knew how to judge the situation and knew when to advance and retreat. Since even he could not endure it, it was apparent that those people from the Great Wu had deliberately provoked them with malicious intentions. Injuring Simon Xing should only be the fuse that ignited the fire. This afternoon, I spent time with my son. That's why the update is late. However, there will still be 4 chapters. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There will be more chapters. Support the author. Support the original reading. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.